Oh, 6 o'clock-ish. And I'll call to session the special meeting. It says a regular meeting, but this is a special meeting of October 3rd, 2023 of the Glenwood Springs Planning and Zoning Commission. This is a hybrid meeting available in person or via Zoom. Passcode 177366 or telephone number 719-359-4580. And I'll entertain a motion to seat, I'll make the motion to seat alternate Cowan. Do I have a second?
A second.
Voice vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Welcome. We're good. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Davey. Commissioner Connerton.
Here.
Commissioner Waller.
Here.
Commissioner Shaver.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Cowan.
Here.
Commissioner Sipperly.
Here.
Okay, thank you. And at this time, I'll ask if anybody in the commission has a conflict of interest for anything on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, I will open the floor for comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda for tonight's meeting. I see no one here present. And don't believe there's anyone online, so I'll close that agenda item and move on to new items. And I believe Watkins is here to present planning item 3723, design variance for Cherry's Moving.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. I'm going to queue up a presentation and I'm going to remember to share my screen and we can get going. Okay. So this is a design variance for Cherry's Moving. Eric Cherry, who's here with us tonight, is the owner of Cherry's Moving. He is looking to open a warehouse facility on 3134 South Grand. This is a design variance, which is different from other variances that you might hear. The criteria are different for them. Design variances are specific to certain sections of our residential and non-residential standards from the code.
George, we have another alternate that could be sat that just arrived.
Okay,
So I'm going to switch out nameplates if you could facilitate that for me.
sure.
And I'll stop the meeting and seat him.
Yes, please.
But just leave it recording, but we'll just note it for the record.
Stop this.
I'll make a motion to seat alternate Houghton.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Welcome, John.
Okay. So I'll just repeat a little bit of what I said before. This is a request for a design variance, and a design variance is different from other variances from the code in that it is specific to the non-residential and residential design standards of the code. And there are different criteria than there are for other variances. So I'm going to show you first some pictures of the site that we're talking about. This is 3134 South Grand. As you can see, it's kind of a long and narrow lot. It's accessed from South Grand. It has an existing access way. Right now, it's not vacant, but the existing improvements that are there will be planned to be removed upon construction of Cherry's Moving the warehouse. Here's another shot looking back towards South Grands. And this is a shot that shows existing conditions in the rear of the lot. If you remember from the staff report, we talk a little bit about the kind of natural buffer that's there between the residential uses that are on the other side of this vegetation. Mr. Cherry's lot rises maybe 10 feet or so. And then there's another residential lot behind that. And so there are some houses these houses, the residential units that adjacent are what trigger the need for the variance that's being requested tonight, which is a waiver of the glazed windows and doors that would otherwise be required on the east elevation, this east elevation that faces the residential uses here. So this is a screenshot of a concept of what the east elevation could look like. The east elevation, again, is what we're looking at here. And you'll notice that there are some windows here at the top. This is kind of a conceptual idea that Mr. Cherry has tossed around. The request is to a complete waiver of this requirement on this elevation. The east elevation only, instead of 30% of the elevation having glazed windows and doors, there would be 0% is what he is requesting. This is also maybe a good time to note that what you would be doing tonight if you approve this variance or if you deny it, you're not approving or denying his warehouse facility. That'll be another action. This is just about the design requirement for the glazed windows and doors. Haven't received any comments from our reviewing agencies or from the public about this project. And as you saw in the staff report, we are recommending approval of it. The criteria for a design variance, which again are different from other the normal variance in the code. There are 2 sections. So in section A, there are 3 criteria and all 3 have to be met. You have to make a finding that all 3 are met in order to approve. And then you need to make a finding that at least 4 in section B are met in order to approve it. So staff's recommendation is to approve. We find that the variance requested does not harm the public health, safety, or welfare because it's not really visible to the traveling public. The public is not going to see that east side when they're traveling along South Grand, and it's not visible or just barely visible perhaps from the residential uses that face that east elevation. The variance requested is in general conformance with comprehensive plan and with the stated purpose and intent of the code, including the specific regulation for which the variance is sought. We do feel that it meets this criteria. We feel that the request is a minor variation and doesn't impede the intent of the code. And the intent of the code here is to have good, attractive design in the public sphere. The criteria number 3, the variance requested will not violate building or fire code requirements. We don't think it does. And now moving to criteria in section B, where 4 of the 6 need to be met. 1, the variance requested advances the goals and policies of the code or achieves the intent of subject standard to the same or better degree as the subject standard. And we feel that it achieves the standard of design quality to the same extent as what the code requires. Criteria number 3 from section B is that the variance requested results in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or exceed benefits associated with the subject standard. And we do not think that the code standard, which is the intent of which is having attractive design in the public sphere, we do not think that's being compromised by this request. Criteria number 5 is the variance is the minimum variance that will afford relief of the subject standards of this code. And we feel that it is because the request is only for one side of the building and the side that faces away from the traveling public. Finally, the 4th criteria we think it meets is number 6. The strict application of the code standards for which variance is sought would produce undue hardship. We do think that this a strict application would present a security risk for the applicant's intended business. And I think he can give you a little bit more detail and understanding about that when he talks to you. But these are the 4 criteria from section B that we think it meets, so which is why we're recommending approval. So our recommended findings are here. I'll just read them to you again. The request meets all approval criteria from section A of the code, and the request meets approval criteria number 1, 3, 5, and 6 of section B from the code. And so I can show you here. I can give you a suggested motion, which is staff recommends approval of the variance request with the findings as stated in the packet. And if you need alternative motions, here are some options for you as well. That is about all I have for you guys. Happy to take any questions you may have. An applicant is obviously here with us as well to answer your questions.
Excellent, thanks, Watkins. Questions for Watkins regarding this item? Seeing none, would the applicant care to come forward and speak to us?
Sure.
Okay, please state your name for the record. And
Thank you. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you for your time. My name is Eric Cherry
okay,
and yeah, basically did the breakdown of what we're applying for. My whole reason is mainly security. It dark backside poses a threat with windows, and we're gonna be storing, you know, high-end collectible furniture, artworks, things of this nature. And we want to try to keep any areas that aren't visible to the public safe and secure and just not prone to attract riffraff. And that's the main concern. There's a couple other ones. Another one is we don't want light, since the windows would be high. We don't want light in the evening shining and being a nuisance to the rear neighbors. That's one of them as well. And another one could be sheer strength of the building. The main section of the building faces the south, the widest point, and there's a lot of major windstorms that come and push up through the south. So that side of the building is a strong candidate for sheer strength of the building, but mainly security is our issue. So that's really it. I don't think it really bothers anybody, and to not have windows on the backside that nobody will see, so.
right, okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Yes, Carolyn.
In the photos, it's pretty easy to see that the back of the lot is densely vegetated.
Sure.
Is the vegetation on your lot or on the other side of the line?
It is both.
And
And-
you intend to keep what's there mostly, or will that be cleared when you develop the property?
No, we actually intend to keep that and also plant more, because that whole back area is, I forget what they call it, but it's a land, it's a landscaping requirement, and there's a good portion of the lot that requires that, so we're gonna try to put a lot of that in that back area. So there'll actually be more added to it, so.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for your time.
appreciate you guys, thank you.
So I will bring it back up here for an entertain a motion regarding planning item 3723, design variance.
I'll make a motion to approve planning file 3723, design variance for Cherry's Moving. And yeah. I'm scrolling. The variance. Sorry, one more sec. It meets all approval criteria from section A of the code. And the section is referenced in the staff report. It also meets approval criteria 1, 3, 5, and 6 of section B of the code section. Also referenced there in the staff report.
Do you want to reference the findings and conditions?
There are no suggested
There
conditions.
are
got
none,
it.
yeah,
So-
just it meets those criteria.
Okay, great. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner White and a second by Commissioner Waller. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
The motion passes unanimously.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, next agenda item, code amendment to title 070. regarding allowed uses, minimum lot sizes, standards, and density bonus.
And
And-
who's gonna be presenting that?
Are you our guy, Watkins?
Just
Another fun one for you.
bear with me for a minute. I've got several things to pull up here. Okay, let's go. We're gonna be talking tonight about housing, as we've talked about other times. The topics tonight that we're gonna be discussing are kind of dense, a little bit heavy, sometimes difficult to explain. We've got a lot to cover tonight. I expect there to be plenty of questions, so please don't hold back. I'll do my best to simplify this as best I can and move through the slides that I have quickly. But we're talking tonight about code amendments. We're going to be looking for recommendations from you all tonight on potential changes to certain residential zoning districts. Recommendations to change our minimum lot standards, a recommendation or changes to the city's density bonus provisions that exist right now in the code. The recommendation, as you all know, will go to city council who makes the final decision on this. I want to, before we dive into these three kind of topics, I'd like to give a little bit of background on the work that's led up to this, because this is a continuation of the strategic housing plan update that you all are familiar with. And then we're going to talk a little bit about public input we've done since our July 25th meeting with you all, when we had a kind of a work session and there's no action taken. So the strategic housing plan update was a process that ended this year with the adoption of the strategic housing plan in June. Before that, we held a public open house for the update at the community center. That was February 9th, and we had good turnout, I think, from lots of segments of the community, people in the development and real estate industry, as well as citizens, property owners of all sorts. We had a joint meeting with you all and city council on June 27th. And then it was July that city council adopted the strategic housing plan update. So this is a continuation of that process, because if you all remember, I think it was Commissioner Waller, you put me on the spot a little bit when we were discussing this plan and said, how are we going to implement this? Great question. Didn't have a real good answer at the time, I'll admit. This is part of what we're doing here. This is part of the implementation of the plan. The plan contains some recommendations that I'm going to read to you guys. One is to update the zoning code to enable up to 3 units on lots currently zoned for single unit housing, requiring deed restrictions for additional units. This is one of the recommendations from the plan. It was contained in the density bonus section of the plan's recommendations, but we're kind of putting this in terms of our use table. Other recommendations that are relevant tonight that we're going to be looking to update or at least discuss are updating the code to define the affordability parameters required to receive a density bonus. Considering a density bonus policy that applies to residential projects below the 10-unit threshold set by the current inclusionary zoning standards. I'm going to be referring back to that quite a bit tonight. And to update the existing density bonus to clearly define policy parameters and how developments can achieve density bonuses. In other words, clarifications to the density bonus program. So let's talk about the survey that we've done. Part of the feedback that we got from you all back in July when we had our work session is that we need to do some public outreach here. So we did this through an online survey. The survey was intentionally online only. We wanted to make it easy for people to participate. Public open houses don't always achieve that. And it was offered in English and Spanish and open for 4 weeks. We did our best to really get the word out about this. And we received 559 responses, which we'll talk a little bit about the limitations of the survey, but that's one of the city's better performing surveys that we've ever put on. So some of the results here for that. In the RR, which stands for rural residential, I'll give you what the acronym stands for, and then if it's okay with you all, I'm gonna continue referring to it as RR for short. In the RR zone districts, people were in favor of allowing duplexes in some form. In some form, I mean, whether that's free market duplexes or deed restricted duplexes, we kind of lump them together that way. In the rural low density zone district, or RL, people were in favor of it in some form. In the RM1, which is residential medium density zone districts, people were in favor of it, although by a much smaller margin than the rest. When we asked the people about triplexes, in the RR zone, people were generally in favor of it in some form. And in some form, meaning one deed restricted unit, two deed restricted units, all free market. We lump them all together as a combination. The RL zone district people were in favor of it. In the RM1 zone district, people were not in favor of it. Still, these votes were all fairly close, fairly split. We can go into the numbers if you'd like that. In terms of the density bonus, we saw a fairly favorable reaction. This is something I'd like to clarify from the staff report. We started digging a little bit more into the data and saw that actually people were pretty in favor of density bonuses in general and in some form. Some people are opposed in general, don't want any density bonuses. This kind of ties into some of the open-ended responses that we can talk about where people express some healthy anti-growth sentiment. People who were in favor of density bonuses, what I circled in the slide is what people were most in favor of, which is deed restricted housing, workforce housing that's affordable and will serve people who work in Glenwood. Now, the survey was a really great exercise. It served a few purposes, one of which was just getting the word out and doing a little bit of education and helping people be involved in these kinds of land use discussions. But it did have some of the limitations. Let's see, it looks like I'll go to this slide and then I'll come back to that one. Among our respondents, we found that it was skewed toward wealthier homeowners. The upzoning questions were not quite perfect on the responses that people, the choices that they had on the survey. It's in general just difficult to explain these topics in a survey because you can't write an essay about what each question means because then people aren't going to skip it. They're not going to take the survey. And it needs to be brief, but there also needed to be some level of education. It's a difficult balance to find. We know that some people were a little bit confused by the questions. There's also a little bit of confusion that we heard about development on the steep hillsides, which is where some of the RL and RR lots are located. Don't expect the public to know this, but I'll tell you this, that if you can't build a single family home because it's too steep, then you're not gonna be able to build a duplex or a triplex. So we are not talking about changing our sensitive area protection standards. We're not talking about building new roads. We're not talking about making what are currently undevelopable lots developable, but obviously that did create some confusion for some folks. Our open-ended responses, which are available in the packet. We made all of the survey data available. One of the lessons learned about this is that you need to provide a way for people to provide open-ended responses in the survey. What the open-ended response was supposed to be about was what do you think should unlock a density bonus? What do you think we should prioritize in the city? And we got some really good responses that were kind of on topic and about that, but we also realized that it was a way for people to kind of express their other thoughts when they didn't have a way to. Some of the topics in general that we saw repeated a few times in the open-ended responses were need for senior housing. We heard some anti-growth sentiment in there. We heard some interest in accessory dwelling units. We heard a number of times that we need more grocery stores in town, more than one grocery store. And these are our words, not necessarily the respondents, but transit-oriented design that would unlock density bonuses. Transit-oriented design meaning that development is located near transit. We also heard that there was some confusion about this density bonus topic and the phrasing of the question was fair. So let's talk about upzoning. Remember our three topics, we're first going to do upzoning, then we're going to talk about lot standards, and then we're going to talk about density bonuses. So what I'm showing here right now is a snippet of our code as it currently shows. And if you can follow my cursor, everything in this column is what's allowed currently in the RR zone. And then in this column is what's allowed currently in the RL zone. And in this column, what's allowed in the RM1 zone. What you'll notice is that multifamily dwellings are not allowed in either of these three right now. Two-family dwellings or duplexes are allowed by special use permit right now in the RL and RM1 zone. So they would have to have a public hearing, and you all would be the deciding body for someone who wants to build duplex right now.
So Watkins, could you just explain, here's RR, RL, RM, what you mean?
What are they? What?
Yep.
Mhm. And I also have a map I can show you where they are.
Yeah.
We can get
But
to
I
that
mean,
if
as
you'd
you
like.
kind of go through here, that would be good.
Sure. RR, rural residential, as you'll also see in the next section is kind of our zone where it's the most rural, and so lots are larger. There's not very many of them in the city. And so houses are more spread out. This is why you don't allow multifamily in this kind of area. And if you think of the code as a spectrum, moving from left to right here, it's not a perfect analogy, but as you move into RL, a little bit more is allowed. Duplexes are allowed in RL with a special use permit. In RM1, lots are a little bit smaller, houses are closer together. There's a little bit more that's allowed in the RM1 zone. Once you get to RM2, you start seeing more multifamily. More is allowed, lots are smaller. We have standards for landscaping, where we don't for most things in the other zones. So you can think of it as a spectrum of moving from more rural to less rural. Our staff recommendation tonight is to change the code to allow duplexes as a use by right in the RR, RL, and RM1 zones. And to change the code to allow triplexes as a use by right in the RM1 zone when one of the three units is deed restricted. So talking a little bit more about what these zone districts are, the RR, rural residential, there are 16 of those. There's 16 lots that are zoned RR in the city. RL, there are 41. We're not talking about a large area of the city when we talk about these two. RM1, we have a lot of lots. There are 988 approximately. About 738 have 7,500 square feet, which under the minimum lot standards that we're getting to next would be eligible for a triplex. And 915, so almost all of them would be eligible for a duplex. Of course, they already could have a duplex with 7,500 square feet and special use permit. When we talk about upzonings, this is an opportunity for infill development, which in the staff report, I talked a lot about what that means. That means development and especially redevelopment in our neighborhoods, adding density within our established neighborhoods, which is an efficient use of land. We already have utilities that serve these areas. There's already schools in these neighborhoods. They're already served by streets and other utilities. But that means there would also be some neighborhood impacts, some of them temporary, some of them not temporary. Redevelopment is a little bit complicated. There's noise and dust and construction parking. These happen with greenfield development as well. Greenfield when you have a vacant lot or something where there's no improvements that exist. This kind of redevelopment is also borne by builders and property owners. So we're not talking about redevelopment that would be subsidized by the city in any way. This would be allowed at the option of the property owners. If they wanted to, it would give them more rights to develop or redevelop. It also implements some of the recommendations from the plan update that we discussed before. And this also fills a need for development that's not larger apartment buildings, that we've heard some pushback for these larger developments, these would be all smaller developments that we're talking about. So switching subjects to lot standards now. This, yep, hopefully you can read this. These are what our recommendations are for changes to lot standards. So we are proposing changes to the, go to the next slide here. Our recommendation is to change the minimum lot area for attached units in the RM1, RM2, RH, and RT zones. Reducing the minimum lot area for the RR zone, and kind of more of a technical change is changing a definition of multifamily development in the code. I'll go back to the chart. What we're doing here, when we are recommending changes to the minimum lot sizes of attached dwellings, that's making it more possible to, on more lots, to have either duplexes, triplexes, or multifamily. Whereas you would need, for example, in the RM2 zone, I'll just pick that randomly. If you had a lot that was 7,000 square feet today, it would not be eligible for a triplex. But with some changes, you would be able to. So this is why this is important for determining density. When we change lot standards, we're allowing smaller and more affordable homes. I know that the size of the lot is not the only determinant of housing affordability, but it is one of them. Smaller houses, smaller apartments tend to be cheaper. And so this allows for more and smaller of them. That means more density, and that means infill development as well. Now we're going to our third topic of the night, density bonus. We currently have density bonus program in our code. It reads that in part, as part of a new residential or mixed use development, the city may offer a density bonus. There's not a lot of specificity in that statement. Of course, there is more that you'll find in the housing guidelines. That's not all there is, but we think that it would benefit from having a little bit more guidance and parameters. To that end, we have 6 recommendations. I'm going to come back to here about why we have them, but and forgive me again for reading a little bit off the slide here to you guys, but our 6 recommendations that I want to describe. One would be for projects between 3 and the inclusionary zoning threshold, which is 10, to offer one free market unit when a project includes a deed restricted unit. In other words, projects between 3 and 10 right now do not have to offer any deed restricted unit, but if they choose to do so, what this proposes is to offer one additional free market unit, as well as some kind of site flexibility, 6 additional feet in height, and a reduction, 30% reduction in numerical standards for lot coverage, setbacks, and landscaping. Our second recommendation is again for this area between 3 and 10 units that provide a deed restricted unit at 60% AMI or 2 units at 100% AMI. This represents a deeper commitment to affordability. And so the bonuses offered here are a bit deeper. 1 free market unit, 12 additional feet in height, and theoretically unlimited flexibility for design standards, minimum lot size, max lot coverage, setbacks, and landscaping. When we say theoretically unlimited flexibility, that sounds a little bit daunting, but that's actually how it is right now. We haven't had a lot of projects that have come through this process. One, Habitat, they did take advantage of some of the flexibility here. What we found in that project is that they weren't trying to push the boundaries too much. It's theoretically unlimited, but we don't see people requesting 100 feet when the height limit is 27 feet. So sounds like a lot. It's not really that different from how it is now. Our third change we're proposing is related to transit-oriented design. Projects that are within 500 feet of a transit stop would get a bonus of 1 free market unit with no site flexibility unless they are a zone district that doesn't have minimum lot standards. Some of those commercially zoned zone districts don't have the same kind of minimums for lots and for attached units. Our fourth recommendation is projects between 3 and 10 that offer all of the units in the project being for sale would be eligible for a bonus. We're proposing one free market unit or reduction, that should say 30% reduction in numerical standards for lot coverage, setbacks, landscaping. Our fifth recommendation here is for projects that are subject to the inclusionary zoning standards. So that's 10 units right now is that threshold, that provide double the number of deed restricted units required. So that's again, a commitment to affordability, which is something that we think the city wants, would be eligible for bonus free market units equivalent to 5% of the project's total unit count, 12 additional feet in height, and that theoretically unlimited flexibility and design standards, minimum lot size, maximum lot coverage, setbacks, landscaping. The sixth recommended change to our density bonus program is a bit more of a technical one. It's a clarification to our standards, which is that density bonus incentives are only to be offered when deed restrictions are included that are not required. So that's just stating that if you're offering deed restrictions because you have to, that you're not eligible for the bonus. So density bonuses, why do they exist? They're an incentive. We've heard in a number of citizen boards that can we find ways to offer carrots and not sticks? Can we provide incentives that guide development, the kinds of things that we want to see? Density bonuses are also going to be infill development in established neighborhoods. They'll have neighborhood impacts just like the kind that we were talking about with an upzoning when there's redevelopment of a single family home into a duplex. The costs are going to be borne by the developers and builders and property owners. There's nothing proposed that would be a subsidy with our tax dollars. They would be citywide. So this wouldn't be specific to any zone districts as we have it presented. And then you have options about whether deed restrictions would be included in the bonus units or not. We obviously have it recommended that they be free market because that's the biggest incentive to people who are looking to do projects. So I know we're gonna have some good discussion, but I also want to put in the criteria that need to be met if you all do choose to recommend changes to the code today. These 5 are the criteria. The comprehensive plan, it is supported. There are 2 goals: increase housing density and provide a diversity in housing type. Both of these goals we think are supported by these changes. And some of the specific policies and actions are also supported. And I'm going to show you some of the recommended findings. Going back to these are the 5 criteria. And so I'm going to show you 5 recommended findings that reflect them. Number 1, criteria, the proposed change is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other city policies. We think that the proposed changes are consistent with the comprehensive plan and support several policies or actions that are described in the comprehensive plan. Criteria number 2, the proposal does not conflict with other provisions of this code or other provisions in the Global Springs Municipal Code. We think the proposed changes to the code's mitigation requirements do not conflict with the municipal code. Criteria 3, the proposal is necessary to address a demonstrated community need. And we think that housing is an important community need. We have some data to back that up. According to the 2023 Strategic Housing Plan update, Glenwood Springs faces a current shortage of approximately 1,300 dwelling units. That's current, not the forecasted 20 years that you also saw. The proposed changes would make development of new housing possible. Though the specific code changes do not mandate affordability, they incentivize affordability and will contribute to an environment that can produce greater affordability. The 4th criteria that needs to be met is that the proposal is necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions and or policy. We find that the 2023 Strategic Housing Plan update found an overall shortfall of around 1,300 dwelling units, a condition that was most likely not present when the existing density limits and minimum lot sizes were created. Finally, condition 5, the proposal is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the code. We feel that the proposed amendment is in line with the purpose and intent of the code. Here's a recommended motion that we can refer back to. And there's a bit to digest here. I'm imagining you all have some questions I can provide. Oh, I'm ready to vote for a motion.
Could you go back to the map that you said you were going to show?
I can.
Thank you. And then I just have another clarifying question. Just on the recommendation for the deeper commitment for affordable housing for number 6, could you just go through that one more time for me, please?
I'll keep the map up. Is that okay?
Yes.
To you guys,
That's totally fine. Sorry.
you
It's
want to,
it's on page,
your question?
say that again, restate my question. Is that what you said? Yeah. It's just a clarifying question, on the recommendation, for the deeper commitment idea to affordable housing. It's just number 6. It's after the paragraph, so staff proposes to add clarifying language stating that projects providing a deed restricted unit or units are not required to do so are eligible. Can you just explain that one more time to me?
Sure.
Thanks.
Inclusionary zoning standards are when there's projects of 10 units or more, the requirement is that rental projects offer 20% of their units, make them deed restricted. For sale projects of 10 units or more, 10% of those units would have to be deed restricted. What this would do is just state that when you have those projects that are subject to inclusionary zoning standards, that's not meeting the, you're not offering a deed restriction out of the goodness of your heart. You're doing it because you're required to, and therefore you're not eligible for the other incentives that we've talked about,
Okay.
1 through 5.
That's what I thought it meant. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
How are we asking to ask questions?
So since you have the map up, could you just kind of explain all the different colors and RM1, RR, RL?
This kind of pale yellow. I already asked you guys if anyone was colorblind, and I've given presentations before that were kind
This
of
is
color
ADA
coded,
compliant.
only to find out later that someone was colorblind and couldn't follow along. This pale yellow is RR. As you can kind of see, if you can see the aerial that's underlying, this is steep hillsides. Some of these areas are unlikely to be developed at all. Let's see if I can find RL for you. Not that. I think we have some up here.
Lighter.
So here's RL. This is, what do we call this? Light cream or something like that. Here's an example of RL. Now RM1, we do have a fair amount in the city. So here's one sample. Here's more. So we do see some RM1 more and less in the core of the city, or just outside the downtown core. Here's some more. Moving in toward downtown, this is RM2, where duplexes and multifamily triplexes are already allowed. Here we have some RH in the brown, and then we get into the commercial districts like the M2, where multifamily is allowed currently. Here we have a neighborhood over by Red Mountain that's RH, multifamily is allowed. Any specific place?
Scroll down further south, if you would.
Tell me when to stop.
Where you live?
What's the dark green?
Dark green is PUD, and that's
Oh,
actually a good question, because PUD stands for Planned Unit Development, and each PUD is different. Some of them do allow duplexes, possibly triplexes, but it's kind of a case by case basis, and so I can't tell you exactly what's allowed in each one.
Because it's driven by covenants, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So what we decide here today would have no effect on PUDs.
That's correct.
The magenta is what?
That's commercial, I believe, yeah. Where multifamily is allowed.
And Watkins, just so we're all on the same page, an ADU is a use by right in the city. Could you display or explain the nuances between an ADU and a duplex, so we all understand that?
Sure. You're right, ADUs are allowed everywhere that single family homes are allowed already. ADUs, in general terms, are meant to be kind of subservient to the main house. They're supposed to be smaller, they're supposed to be less noticeable. They do have required parking that goes with them, Duplexes are more of a situation where both units are larger. So you could have a duplex where both units are larger than the maximum area that's allowed in an ADU. They can get a little bit messy when you're looking at them, but duplexes are larger and kind of more of a defined type.
Carl, are you considered staff? Can I ask a question of you?
I don't know, staff. Staff. But I'll try.
So typically when we're reviewing a planning application, we're referring to the building code to guide us and the comp plan. We are talking about changing code. So really, we are relying on the comp plan.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a guidance document, absolutely.
Yeah.
You could look to any number of planning documents, the housing strategic studies,
Right.
comp plan, all of those things are kind of rolled into it when you're really talking about these kinds of legislative changes. And you're actually relying on the planning code, not the building code, when you're hopefully
Planning code.
reviewing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you're really looking at those bigger picture planning documents, because you can't really look to the code to amend the
Right.
code, if you will.
Of course. And so my follow-up question is, we are also not basing our decisions on public comment.
Well, certainly you're basing it on public input like you would any other time. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm hoping that when you're making decisions up there, you're giving the weight to those comments that you feel that they need to have with the application in front of you. It's the same thing here as you're talking about a legislative change. I'm sure you're going to hear some public comments either tonight or later. Those comments have the weight that you deem they have and may be influential on your decision making as they provide information or perspective on different issues.
As it relates to the comp plan and the
Because you made a comment about, or showed up on your presentation, the language, unlimited flexibility. Can you talk about that a bit?
Right. I might try to get back to that slide too. That is the way the code reads right now with the density bonus. Right now, we have a density bonus that's allowed, and site flexibility is part of what's offered. There are no parameters for that. It doesn't say up to 30% for numerical standards. Someone could ask whatever they wanted, for whatever they wanted if they're eligible for that density bonus. Is someone going to ask for the moon? Are they going to ask for 0-foot setbacks all around and max out the height, go beyond the height and all that? I think they would come in and be worried about a denial. But that is how it reads right now, is that there are no parameters for it.
Sounds very open.
Does.
Very ominous.
I mean, I can understand the carrot aspect and all of that, but which I certainly agree with that approach, but it just also sounds like you're opening the door to anything and everything at the same time.
That's part of why we recommended putting some parameters on how much flexibility is offered. That you'll see in some of these recommendations, 30% reduction for numerical standards. So that would be the most you could ask for, but that would also allow some flexibility to accommodate these extra units that would be there, extra units, because that's something that we want. That's the idea here. We're getting something that we want in exchange. We offer a little bit of flexibility to make it work on the site.
And in regarding just these numbered items, you reference if you add a deed restricted unit, have we put parameters on what that deed restriction requirement would be? Is it the 100% AMI?
That's a good question. And that's what we're thinking. We're thinking restricted for affordability to 100% AMI for the household, as well as the standard requirement that goes with that, which is work requirement in Glenwood Springs. So that this would be workforce housing that's affordable.
I have a question on design. And I know in your staff report, you kind of talked about design, building code staying the same pretty much as you had. So let's say you're an RM1 And you, or let's say you're in the downtown area, which was the pink or whatever color. I'm not colorblind, but I don't recognize my colors, so I'll say it that way. So there's, we have setbacks, we've got landscaping, we've got, there's design codes downtown, there's all of this sort of thing, and so what things are different, and really not even whether it's downtown or RM1, wherever it is, what codes other than the lot size, we changed the lot size, are gonna be different, so I live in RM1, let's say someone comes in and wants to do a triplex next door to me and looks,
They're eligible.
everyone's all pissed off, it looks like some crazy thing. I mean, so are there any, what are the rules, the codes about that?
Right. There would be no additional flexibility in this kind of instance. They would still have to meet all our design standards, all our parking standards. So for triplexes, 6 off-street parking spaces are required. That would remain the same. If you can't fit 6 off-street parking spaces, then you wouldn't be eligible for a triplex. It wouldn't work.
So like if you're in RM1, there's no alleys, let's say, or that sort of thing, that would be a difficult thing to do. Is that right on the parking? I mean, even for a duplex, there was a number, what was it, two off-street parking, so. So 3, so if there's not an alley, then you need to take up space in your front yard or side yard. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, how does that play out? How can that, it seems difficult to occur, I guess is my.
Did you want to add something?
Just as a reminder on the parking, so for the record, the numbers that Watkins state are the requirement for duplexes and triplexes. We do have provisions in our code that allow for parking reductions, which is at director approval. So that can, depending on specific criteria laid out in the code, which you guys are probably very familiar with, be reduced to a lower number. I just wanted that noted for the record.
So it's like the ultimate flexibility that George was asking about.
Not ultimate, this has parameters, very specific
infinite.
parameters.
Theoretically,
And as their name, God.
unlimited
No,
flexibility.
but anyway, I mean, what my question is, so
Yeah.
it sounds like in RM1, everything else is the same, except for additional requirements that you might have if you have a duplex or a triplex, which is parking really the only
Setbacks would
thing?
be the
Well, but
same, right?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if, what was that?
Landscaping would come into play with triplexes.
And lot coverage?
Lot coverage is another one.
So,
Height.
so are there landscaping requirements though already for RM1 and height and all of that? So is it pretty much the same? I guess that's what my question is trying to find out if anything's different
Other than the lots. Just the lots.
rather than all that stuff.
Just the lot sizes, allowed uses. They would, what other standards apply to everything? You'd have to have sidewalks, you'd have to have planting strip, you'd have to have street trees. You'd have to have the space to fit all these things. And if you don't, then, aside from our flexibility measures, like the parking reduction or like a variance, administrative adjustment, those things already exist.
Okay.
Those would be your options.
So-
Otherwise it wouldn't work.
So one follow-up question, I'm kind of hammering on this a little bit, but is that I know in downtown, there's design requirements and that sort of thing, because I built down there and I know here's things you have to do with your massings and all of that sort of thing. But as you move into RM1, there's not, I don't think there's, are there design criteria as you move out into the RM1, out into the,
Yes. So there are specific downtown design standards, specific roof forms, colors, massing, like you mentioned.
all right.
That applies regardless of zone district. That's a geographical area in which those standards apply.
Yeah,
So
that makes-
outside of that downtown area, our standard residential or non-residential sign standards would
Yeah.
apply.
I know that because we've seen some of the variances, so, okay.
And you say triplex requires 6 parking spaces,
Yes, sir.
Obviously.
not a 1.5. Why is an apartment 1.5
So it's 1.5 per units and then 1 guest space.
for a
per-
guest
per
space?
5.
So it's
That goes.
4.5 rounds up to 6,
Correct.
5, shouldn't,
pardon me,
shouldn't it round to 5?
plus the guest.
5.5 rounding up to 6.
4.5, 5.5 rounds to 6.
That slide you put up, that talked about the eligible parcels that would, in RM1, it was like 900 something. Was that based off of current standards or the proposed changes?
I'll just go back to it. That was actually just information about what parcels we have. Give me a second to share slide again.
But there was two on there where it could be a proposed, like 915, there it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we have 988 lots that are zoned RM1. Of those, there are 915 that are at least 5,000 square feet, which would make them theoretically eligible for a duplex
okay,
under these
Yep.
proposed
Yep.
changes. 738 theoretically eligible for a triplex.
but that's current standards, right?
These would be under proposed as well.
Proposed, okay,
They would be eligible for triplex under the
Got it.
proposed.
okay.
We have, in the agenda pack, we have two redlined tables of allowed uses. One allows for special use permits for triplexes in RR and RL, and one does not. I just want to be clear on what's being recommended or proposed.
And I think you have good eyes. I think there may have been an error in one of those screenshots in there. What is proposed is allowing duplexes in RL and RR. Like
By right.
One as well, by right. And triplexes only in RM1 by right, when you have that. one.
And with a special use permit
No,
or
no,
no?
what's proposed is it would be by right, meet the standards, come in for a building permit.
Sorry, I'm asking, as proposed, are we proposing special use permits to get a triplex in RR or RL or
Yes.
disallowed?
No, sir. So under proposal, it would be duplex would be the max for RR and RL.
I just wanted to clarify. And then is height measured to the peak or is it to the midpoint? What are the standards for measuring height?
So it's measured to the midpoint of the highest gable, unless there's a flat roof and go through the coping, that very top part.
I was wondering if you could speak a little to whether or not duplexes and triplexes have to be attached. Could you have, say, a triplex that's 3 small houses on a lot that meets the standards? Do they have to be attached?
We would consider that 3 single-family homes if they were not attached. So the triplexes and duplexes, they are attached products. ADUs could be detached or attached. They could be either one, but if they're separate, we would consider those single-family homes.
Do you think there's some benefit to the public by having them attached?
It's really more about kind of categorizations and housing types as they exist. It's a way to regulate density. It's just really a different kind of housing typology, I would say, if they're detached.
I would jump in and say that I know that we're seeing some planning, a couple of communities down on the Front Range are kind of taking that approach to create more of a cottage feel as opposed to, an attached triplex. And certainly that may be something we want to think about as we look at those definitions and kind of grind on this legislation a little bit.
Yeah, where I'm coming from with that is that it seems as sometimes if you have neighbors immediately on the other side of the wall, it could actually compromise your happiness in living in the space. And as you say, some cottages and smaller homes that are freestanding could kind of make the feel of being in a single family home, which seems like why we established these districts that way in the first place. So maybe we could talk about that at some point. On the reduction in standards page, I think that you might have said a 3% reduction in standards on some, but I'm thinking you meant 30% across the board.
That's correct.
Okay.
30%. That was a type.
And the density bonus, one last question. The density bonus, I think you said applies citywide and is not specific to zone districts.
That is how we've written, how we post it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Watkins, you said at one point about, the advantages of infill, having infrastructure. and so forth. And you mentioned schools. Do you know currently what the school population numbers are right now in Glenwood?
I do not. I do not. That's a good question. I don't know if Hannah or Carl knows.
Oh, come on. Well, I actually had a similar question. There seemed to be a lot of public comments about just infrastructure and safety and, fire safety. My assumption is that we as a city, assess these needs per capita and that we adjust with some sort of growth nexus. Is that, how do we assess whether our emergent services are being met? Police officers per capita.
I think there's a couple of different ways that we go about that. And actually, we're just kind of undertaking to look at that specifically in kind of a different context on the revenue side on what do we need to project for. There are some standards that we would look to. I can't quote those off the top of my head of what you're trying to achieve with police force to number of residents. It's a little bit antiquated to think about it that way. It's more service calls that you're really focused on. Because you can have a very large community that doesn't have much in the way of demands, and vice versa. Similarly on planning for fire services. I do know on the evacuation planning and those kinds of things, those kind of large scale events, we're about midway through or 2/3 of the way through a fairly comprehensive and detailed plan around that includes, kind of those things we always think about like fire, but also, plague, famine, locusts, all the things that have hit town recently. So, those things are being planned for as well. I think in all of this, we do run into some areas, and South Glenwood is a great example, as we have been hammering away on the South Bridge project for 20 years now. Recognizing there are some transportation corridors that have to be updated before some of this will work. And I think that's going to have to be part of the conversation, especially when we get at the council level on this.
That was gonna be that was gonna be a comment I was gonna have to piggyback on what Joey was saying was traffic. There's a lot of comments about traffic and difficulty getting around already. I mean, obviously we have construction, but just like, looking at just the whole picture in regards to what the community wants going forward. And there was a lot of public comment, I would have to say, on like getting from point A to point B.
Yeah, it's that's one of those interesting things, that there, part of what we're trying to do is reduce congestion and traffic by moving more of our workers on site and in town. I think the study indicated something over 70% of workers in Glenwood commute in. So, it's one of those things that is counterintuitive, I think, for a lot of people. They think that if you build more housing, there's automatically going to be more traffic. It's not quite that straightforward of a relationship.
I think it was 70% said they live here. And then the other 40% said they come in. So, but just not.
We do have a big share of commuters that come into Glenwood for work. And to add to that, I would say that when people work here and live here, that also makes it more possible for them to walk or ride bikes or even take transit to get around as well. So I agree with Carl's point that it makes counterintuitively, it can change at least the traffic pattern and have less kind of through town traffic.
But I think that is one of the questions. I mean, one of the comments that I've heard is that, you reduce through traffic, but you have more in traffic, and, it'd be nice if everyone walked and rode their bikes, but other than Joy, I don't know if all of us do that all the time, but I think you have more in traffic of going down to pizza, going downtown, going to grocery stores, using all the services. And I'm not saying good or bad, but I just think that's to me, makes sense that there is more of that kind of traffic. And it's, how do you balance that coming through? Because, what was I think the numbers we saw were something like, and I don't know if it's set, 70%. And this was when we did the comp plan or some of the other stuff that there was a high percentage of people that lived outside that ended in Glenwood. So that was an interesting thing, I think, for us. But anyway, I know I've heard that from a lot of people that there's more in traffic versus through traffic. But
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Anecdotally, it
my
seems that
interest.
way, yeah.
Yeah, I think,
Um,
City Market, our favorite place to shop. Oh,
Well-
wait, that's our only place to. shop.
Well, in part, I mean, if you
Well,
have
but yeah, but I mean, anyway, that's,
if you have the dream of home ownership, it's much more achievable in Newcastle or Rifle, and then your employment still is in Glenwood. And if we build these and they are, rentals, are you gonna really sell your house and garden and move into a rental? Probably not, One thing that we have heard a lot, and especially through the public comment and the survey, is more opportunities for ownership. And I know that's one of Joy's pet topics. And I would like to see somehow that addressed as we move forward with these code changes, incentivizing more ownership opportunities as opposed to just rentals.
and it seems like this is a tough, I mean, I totally agree, but it's tough because condominiumization is a tough thing anyway. And you're adding on a duplex or a triplex, and so the ownership thing, I mean, it's a rent.
It is, it's interesting because we had the governor in town today to talk about primarily housing with city council and a few other elected officials, and that conversation around how do we address the inability to condominiumize because of the insurance market right now. And that is something that I think we have been able to elevate on the legislative sort of consciousness. I think really there just was a misunderstanding about how bad that situation has got with the unregulated insurance out there, in that now we're seeing on projects, doing a project in Avon, the GC contract came back with an exclusion that the units couldn't be condominiumized could not for like, the 8-year statutory period. It wasn't a huge deal, but I wanted to inquire as to why. And the GC said, because now my subs that provide the best prices, they have exclusions in their insurance policies that they can't work on multifamily condominium, anything that's going to be condominiumized. And so that's really something we have to address at the state policy level. And so it's frustrating. The reason I say all of that is it's frustrating at this level because we're trying to incentivize it. And there are factors that we just can't control or impact that are actually driving what's going on in our market.
I was happy to see the density bonus for sale units. I also wanted to just bring up that it was interesting to see that the survey respondents were primarily homeowners that were English speaking and of, a decent area median income, 140%, which to me says a huge constituency is not being reached, which I know you guys do everything in your capabilities to reach those people, but people who could actually benefit from this infill are not responding. And I think it's just important to note that.
That's a good point, and that's also the reason that we made the survey, that people could take it if they didn't live here.
Mhm.
I wanted to bring up one other thing too. A part of the strategic plan was, the whole beginning of it was how Glenwood shouldn't lose its character. That was like really important to a lot of community members, everybody who came. And one thing that was mentioned in the upzoning was the Historic Preservation Committee and their concern about upzoning and just, how that might look for, losing, some of the historical structures in town. And I'm just wondering or not wondering, but I just wanted to, say that that is another thing for, us to think about as we're grinding this out, as Carl would say, and bringing this forward, because character is as important as well as, unheard voices is, so. I guess it's more of a comment.
Yeah, I think it was actually the Housing Commission that first brought that up as a concern, and then it was discussed at the Historic Preservation Commission, and it's not something you can really sort of make a decision about, but you have to acknowledge that there is a risk of older homes being torn down to be redeveloped, redevelop the property with a duplex or a triplex. it would be nice to see some incentivization to retain older structures. Turn a single family home into a duplex. And when drafting some preservation suggestions, I thought the density bonus might apply. If you preserve an old home, then you might be entitled to another unit. So I don't know if that is a tool in our toolbox, but it is definitely one of my concerns.
I think I'm just going to interject here. I know you guys have a lot of feelings and opinions on this. If we could maybe continue with the questions and then move to public comment, and then we'll get to opining on all the things. Thank you.
Okay.
I do have a question here. You referenced Senate Bill 213 and the implication of that by hook or crook, these discussions are happening at the state level and maybe imposed upon localities. In analogous legislations that have been successful, have there been examples of deference to localities where they have developed these codes, these opportunities?
None that I'm aware of that specifically kind of carved out exceptions for municipalities that have these in place. But, depending on what comes down the pipeline, we might not need to make any changes once any future legislation comes around.
What I would say is that a good portion of the conversation today with the governor was, don't do things that slow us down, and don't do things that, really significantly interfere with us trying to plan our communities in the way that we would like to see them. That doesn't mean that we're going to exclude people. This is not Cherry Hills, which is, kind of the poster child for exclusivity in the state and pushing everybody out and not approving projects and things like that. But incentivize it for us to do the kinds of things that you would like to do rather than use just the stick. There are a lot of incentives. There's tons of funding that can be taken away if you don't want to abide by, some of these potential standards. It was interesting because almost every idea that the governor floated today, I had to raise my hand and say, well, we're doing that in Glenwood and Silverthorne and Avon and Crested Butte and Snowmass Village and Basalt. At which point he asked me, who don't you represent? But the point of that is that I think most of what they're looking at now is going to be incentivizing and recognizing what's been done up here.
And another, thank you. There was some reference and commentary attached to the staff report, which thank you, well done. It was a good educational read, so thank you for that. Regarding what it may mean in the context of housing values, like your home value if a duplex comes in, as Commissioner Waller brought up kind of that context of what's happening here and what does that mean? Do we have examples? Carl, you just mentioned some of these mountain communities where there's a lot of this type of development that's been going on for a while. Is there any data, anything that we can bring forward that kind of massage that or provide a salve to that concern?
Your recent assessment. I don't mean to flip, but the reality is that home prices and values are skyrocketing. And honestly, we have not seen, I mean, anecdotally, I wish there was better data and maybe it's something we can pull together. Anecdotally, I think Silverthorne's a good example that does not have inclusionary zoning, but invests with their 5A money. I don't know, they have 300, 400 units of deed restricted housing in town. It doesn't matter what gets built in Silverthorne, it sells for over $1 million or $2 million. And so, like I said, anecdotally, at least, we haven't seen any impact on property values in a community like Glenwood or Silverthorne or Avon. And those are all kind of historically sort of working class communities, if you will. And we're just not seeing any impacts on property values. And I guess it's quite a little bit of a question of maybe how much is enough in your property value escalating. I would say that flexibility probably provides more. If you really do want to sell it, it's going to be worth a lot more if you can do a use by right duplex on it in the market we're seeing right now. And maybe that's something we talk to the Realtor Association about, because I think they would back up that kind of feeling.
Is there incentives for cities when they do upzoning and these type of things at the state level?
So
At the conference that you were just at?
Yes, great conference, lots of knowledge, love planners all congregating in one spot. Part of why we're doing this is on the heels of some grant applications that we did. And so this is finishing up our IHOP grant, and no, that's not a pancake house. And so part of those requirements from the state is adopting strategies. There's a suite of 16 strategies that you can look at and see if it works for your community, which is what we're doing. Glenwood has adopted quite a few of those. And so the density bonus, as well as the upzoning with the duplex and triplex, is a couple of those strategies that we don't have. And so it's meeting those requirements for this grant and also making us more competitive for other grants. Proposition 123 is one of those, and we have made a commitment to that effort, 19 affordable housing units per year. So that's ongoing, but these efforts certainly make us more competitive in those endeavors as well.
So we have to take from the menu of 16 improvements to essentially increase housing. And the grants are, where does the money go that you get for the grant?
Well, so this one was for the consultant that did the strategic housing plan update that paid for that effort. We also have an IHOI grant that is paying for system improvement fee waivers for affordable housing projects. And then we have other grant opportunities that we are eyeing down the line of applying for, which we don't have those applications out yet or the specifics.
So they're all pretty much directed at affordable housing and in increasing density and providing workforce housing.
I would say they're all aimed at providing additional affordable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing efforts. Yes.
And how does this all look for non-conforming duplexes and triplexes and?
It would legalize
Very
them
good. What's
potentially.
in-
It would legalize them, but there could still be some non-conforming elements about them. So if you have a duplex where it's not allowed right now, I know there's none of them that exist like that in the city.
No,
But and if it didn't have any on-street parking when it was required to, for example, that would still be a non-conforming situation.
so would these people be encouraged or to come forward and, well, it'd be a use by right, so you wouldn't need it to be permitted.
Correct.
She said.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I just thought I'd throw in some examples because
Okay.
I had a meeting this last week with an interesting house in downtown that's got a storage area that could very easily be turned into a unit and has tried to be turned into a unit, but it's not currently allowed. And so our department has sometimes the unfortunate task of letting people know that. Even though it walks and talks like it could be a unit, we won't currently allow it by our code. So we are currently having those conversations with people with an eye on this conversation tonight of perhaps that might alleviate some of those. And there are some that make sense and there are some that don't.
What were the parameters that didn't allow that to be in that case?
Lot size.
On the back of lot size, in the red line table for the dimensional standards showing the reduced lot sizes. It references attached dwelling sharing a common wall. I assume that would be amended to, does a ceiling count as a wall if you had a stacked duplex or triplex?
It would, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was the case, because clearly it's geared towards townhouses right now.
Yeah, multifamily in general, though, attached units where, attached, whether it's above or to the side.
I have a question on short-term rentals. I mean, we don't talk about it here, but it seems like we'd have no short-term rentals with this. And the only reason I say that is because if we're trying to increase housing, it seems to me like a short-term rental is not housing our workforce, it's housing people that are coming to visit here. So I'm just kind of tossing that out as, what's the thought on that?
Right, if it's your free market unit, can it be?
We allow short-term rentals. We have limitations on them. There are buffer limitations. You can't have.
What was that? How many?
Buffer limitations, so distance within a certain distance of existing ones. Yeah, there are limitations specific to multifamily developments that we can get. Do you want to get into the specifics of that? or-
Well, I guess my question is, do we think that, let's say someone wants to do it and they want to turn it into I know that for Airbnb, there's 250 feet or whatever. I mean, there's rules and stuff like that, but.
So the proposals wouldn't change anything with regards to our current rules for short-term rentals. If you're in a buffer area and you wouldn't be allowed to as a single family home, then you still wouldn't be allowed to if you had 3 units there. We have a cap. I didn't mention that. We also have a cap on the total number that are allowed in the city. So I don't think there'd be too much.
You don't think that's.
I think if that's something you're worried about with how you guys allow this to come in. I know staff has recommendations that some of these have deed restrictions on the triplex, on the duplex. If you're concerned, then you could certainly put a stipulation in for those deed restrictions, that those units not be allowed to be short-term rentals. If it's a free market unit, depending on how you guys go and how we bring this to council, that would be allowed. Currently, we only have restrictions. You cannot have a short-term rental in an accessory dwelling unit. So that's a provision that we have now. But if it, sorry, I was looking at the screen. If you didn't put that in now, then that would be a possibility for the free market units.
It's my understanding that it's increasingly difficult to get a permit for a short-term rental, is particularly in the downtown area because of those buffer zones. Is that correct? We've seen a reduction in short-term rentals, haven't we?
Do you know if there's been a reduction?
We haven't seen necessarily a reduction, but there's an ebb and flow with, we've seen a lot of sales in the downtown area where we have those buffers. And so they're more spread out now. But we have seen a slight uptick in the permits that we've issued. But we're not getting real close to the capped limit that we have set so far. Council has mentioned reviewing that possibly in the future.
What is it? At some point in your presentation, or not presentation tonight, but the information we have in our packet, there was discussion about various states and communities that have upzoned. And I think Minneapolis is the one that is the longest standing.
It was an early one, yes, sir.
But comment I think was that it hasn't brought a huge surge of activity. On the other side of that is, and I don't know what their goals were in Minneapolis, like, they may differ from what our goals are. But has it been effective for them to upzone?
I would not say I'm an expert on what their rules are and what their goals are. I think part of their goals it was kind of a general thrust toward more equity, reducing exclusivity in neighborhoods and allowing more diversity of housing, diversity of population. I don't know if I could speak accurately whether it's met their goals or if they're having any problems. The commentary that I've seen is that they haven't seen dramatic changes since allowing this.
So it may not be an effective way to achieve goals. Is kind of what I'm questioning or wondering about.
With our goals here, our goals are to give property owners more choices, allow for a greater diversity of housing, and potentially increase, albeit by probably small amounts, the total supply and housing stock here. And if we do this, time will tell, I think.
Yeah, time will tell, I guess.
I have a question about if you had an existing building and say it was 4,000 square feet and you either divide it this way or this way, it was single family, you make it into 2 units, is that a duplex?
It could be. It would have to have all of the elements that homes have. It'd have to have provisions for eating, sleeping, sanitation, all that. meet the parking requirements, then it could work that way. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm thinking like a single family homeowner with my concerns for multifamily or increased density. And my assumption is people are thinking there are going to be all these multifamily homes in Glenwood, and they're going to be dilapidated and full of renters that don't take care of their property. Is there any safeguard for, or any comment from staff on how we can provide assurances that this is not the goal of the city, is to,
I would, well, one question you could ask in response is, how different really is a duplex than a single family home?
Yeah.
How different is a triplex? Is it very different? Maybe it is. We have lot standards so that you can't have a triplex on a very small lot. That's the purpose of them. If you have a triplex, then it by necessity needs to be a bit bigger. Quality of homes, that's not something we regulate until things get really egregious. We kind of stay out of people's business when it comes to that.
thank you.
So I'll kind of piggyback on that a little bit, is that, and you know, the survey is the survey, but there was quite a bit, 559 responses. I think that's pretty good. But it was basically 49-51, so 50-50 on doing I think it's duplexes in RM1. So I guess one thing, and this probably is more of a conversation for us later with the motion, but so did you look at all at maybe, do you hold back on doing something in RM1 and seeing how it works out in all of the other zone districts? And let's say 2 years from now, you come out and say, well, geez, this all worked good, to Joy's issue that she brought up, it's no different than, someone not keeping their property up as a single family versus a duplex or triplex. And I know we have duplex and triplexes downtown already, but then based on that, then you add it to a large zone district, which I forget what the numbers were, but it was like 900 and something with the numbers in there versus the others.
That would be within your power to recommend. Yep.
But did you guys talk about that, or was that a conversation? Or, I mean, it seems like it's kind of,
All or nothing.
yeah, all or nothing.
We've certainly had conversations of a more phased approach based on the recommendations that have come out of the strategic housing plan update, as well as other work that's happening with the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. We have another IHOP grant with them. So we have a consultant that's working with all of those jurisdictions and also making recommendations. That final report is not out yet, but we as staff are privy to the recommendations they're making. So all of the recommendations that staff is receiving is pointing to what you have received tonight. So it's a little bit, and these conversations come up with P&Z and City Council of, do you go big and try and capture the opportunity now, or do you take a more cautious approach? And we have relied on the recommendations from housing experts greater than ourselves to help us in making the recommendation before you tonight.
It's not all gonna happen tonight.
Well, I think we should open it up for comments from the public. So I will do so. And please be aware that there is a 3-minute limit on comments, and the timer will be active on the board. And please come forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Linda Holloway. I live at 115 Fifth Street in the house my great grandfather built. I believe this, I haven't proved yet, but I believe this is a ugly stepchild of Polis's Senate Bill 23-203, which will change the state. There is no setback ever. There is no limit on them. You can have 25 people in a 1-bedroom condo. The things that they would allow with that bill, and he's trying to pass it again this year. And there's no, you won't have any say. You won't be busy. Counties, cities, towns, municipalities, nobody will have a say. That bill will have the final say. This meeting is considering a change in zoning and building codes, allowing more housing without considering the enduring impact that will have on incumbent residents. Your job is to work for the good of those who live here already, not to go out and get more people pried into the city limits. Perhaps you sincerely believe that this is a viable solution, and that makes you feel good. But it is an untenable problem. It is a short-term solution that will create new problems and won't permanently fix a lack of housing or a lack of affordable housing. Perhaps you aren't willing to recognize that Glenwood's geography is self-limiting and not amenable to hundreds and thousands of additional people. More people mean paying more for more schools, and where will they be built? More police, and where will they live? Expanding utility production, jails, and roads. There is a concept in clothing called ease. It means that there is enough room to get into and out of your clothing without needing the help of other people to shimmy into and pry yourself out of clothes like a cork in a bottle. We will be a cork in a bottle. The politically correct more housing now ideology may feel good to some believers, but it is blind to its consequences, overcrowding and all the associated problems. As a committee that has some authority, you need to have a lot of foresight here. Watkins, I apologize, I can never say his last name. Watkins said this will give more increased property owners' rights. How about neighbors' property rights? How about their rights? I have.
Ma'am, you're going to have to limit your comments, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. The survey is biased in the extreme. I'll be glad to talk to you about that if you want me to. And nobody in the city foresaw how much those bed and breakfasts and overnight things would affect the rental properties in this town. And you said, go big or go home. You said in one.
Ma'am, please.
The hope is to change the rules.
Thank you.
Hope. I apologize.
Thank you for
Any
your,
questions? I apologize.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would wish to address? Please come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Andy Mueller at 1221 Bennett Avenue. I just want to thank the Planning Commission for talking about this very challenging subject. Thoughtful conversation, staff did some excellent work. No survey is perfect. They're hard to get good responses to. Just a couple comments. One, on affordability, there's a discussion, very small, but about the desirability for detached units over attached units. If this is about affordability, it is so much cheaper to build attached units. And I agree that they have benefits to be detached. And so the Commissioner Sipperly is correct, but I'm concerned that if your goal is to really encourage affordable housing, the biggest expense in housing is the cost of building the house. And it's really a lot cheaper. It's why Habitat has gone with multifamily units instead of our attached units. Two, I have to say this, well, there's not zero impact. The idea of having multifamily homes across the street from you or next to you, if you're a single family owner, I gotta say, I lived at 10th and Bennett for 5 years. I now live at 12th and Bennett. 10th and Bennett, my house is directly across the street from the old sanatorium. I feel like the residents there were amazing neighbors. They were great neighbors. It was a wonderful neighborhood. Most of the other homes in the neighborhood are single family homes. It worked fine. By my count, according to the city records, there were 21 apartments in that building, in the middle of a single family zone. And it worked fine. So please don't let folks who are scared of something they don't know prevent this city from housing people who work here. So thank you.
Thank you. And I see no one else in attendance here. Is there anybody online that? Don't believe so. So I will close the public comment period and bring it back up to the commission.
All right, this is discussion.
Well,
A motion.
we should have a motion.
Make it, John.
I'll do a motion.
Are these 4 different action items?
So I was gonna do a motion based on staff recommendation on the consideration of code text changes to 070.020 and 070.030 and 070.45 of the municipal code involving changes to allow uses, minimum lot sizes, and incentives for residential development.
And the findings.
And the, yes, and the, sorry, the suggested findings, sorry. I'm not as apt at this as Commissioner Sipperly. With the suggested findings and the proposed amendment 1 through 5. And I recommend approval of the text changes to the municipal code in those sections I've aforementioned as described in the staff memo with findings as written in the staff memo.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Connerton and a second by Commissioner White. Discussion.
All right, so I guess since I already put my foot in my mouth. I think it's worth talking just briefly. This is a little bit on my soapbox, but about the history of single family zoning. It historically has been used as a classist and racist tool to keep undesirable people out of one's neighborhood. I think sort of the most charitable view of zoning's origin would be to separate truly undesirable externalities like a meatpacking plant next to your house. It certainly should not be used to keep a structure that's of a similar bulk, not going to cast shadows on your house, not going to cast shadows on your sidewalk. I don't believe that's the intent of zoning. Yeah, frankly, I think it's a little silly that we have an inclusionary zoning policy without addressing our exclusionary zoning.
I agree.
So I guess a question I have, so we have one motion, but there's gobs of stuff in here.
Mhm.
So it's difficult for me to just do a hand wave. Yeah, it's all good. So it seems like we would put up each of your items, and I don't know if this is what Joy or someone was getting at, but you had a pretty good foil, you had a foil, you had a pretty good slide on going through, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that kind of hit those items. And I guess I'd like to propose that we kind of talk about them individually so we can go through them. Otherwise it's a random willy-nilly conversation.
That's fair.
I agree.
So I lumped them together as one action item for these 3, I'll say, categories of changes. I think we can do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did break out each of the the 5 findings, and there's 5 findings because there are 5 criteria that are required to.
Well, I wasn't thinking the findings so much. I was thinking your,
If I
Just
can
to
hop
the-
in, is that actually walking through what the proposed code changes are?
Well, there were-
Categories.
yeah,
So you guys can, if you desire to amend or change any of those, make
Correct.
an amendment to the main
Yeah.
motion, you can do.
I
that.
think, yeah, and I think there were 6 of them. I kind of wrote them down, one, if you do one additional deed restriction, if you do a 60% and 100% and.
Oh, you're just talking about the bones or density bonuses then?
No, I'm talking about,
I think you guys have
Each-
3 categories.
yeah, I think it's going through each. I think it's
Okay.
going.
And
through
then 6
the
And then
recommendations.
duplex,
six
triplex and
density
all,
bonuses.
and all
Okay.
those.
Sure, I'm happy to walk through them all.
Yeah,
So first category being upzoning, this right here on the slide was the staff recommendation.
Mhm.
I mean, so do we want to talk about each one while they're up there? I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I
So we
think
can
it's a
kind
good
of get
idea.
organized.
That sounds good.
Okay,
Allow duplexes as a right in the residential, hold on, please.
well, I mean,
Rural
pretty simply,
residential.
it's duplexes are allowed everywhere. And triplexes are allowed everywhere as long as you have one deed restrict. I mean, am I reading that?
No,
Not
only
quite.
RM1.
Triplexes under the proposal would be allowed in RM1 zones with the deed restriction, and then no change anywhere else in the city. Triplexes are already allowed in the RM2, RH, RT.
Right.
Commercial zones as well.
So, I mean, it's a good discussion. I mean, I would like to point out that in the one slide that he showed us was there was gonna be 16 in rural remote, 41 in the RL, and then RM1 is the one that would be probably most affected by duplex.
But again, they have to meet
They have to meet the
design
specific-
guidelines, which would be the
Yes.
parking, the setbacks, all
Yeah,
the things.
all
So
those
some of those would not necessarily qualify.
And to say that I mean, I don't think there's gonna be rush on your department. I don't think people are gonna be rushing in. I think this does make it more incentivized for people to come forward and actually do it.
I don't have an issue with the duplexes in all of the aforementioned zone districts, but I think the triplex might merit a little more conversation from my point of view.
I'm wondering if maintaining a special review is not a valid thing to do in RM1
For the triplex.
for the triplex.
Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of assures site appropriate.
I mean, just for instance, say there's a neighborhood that is already impacted by a lot of residents and has parking issues and and it's not the fault of the triplex, but it is a condition in that neighborhood that would only potentially be exacerbated by allowing a triplex in that neighborhood. So a
mean-
special review may prevent that from just making a bad situation worse.
I mean, they still would have to meet all the criteria, and in some instances, it might not work because of so.
Well, that's true. That's true. That's true anywhere. Yeah.
I mean, as is, they would have to have a 7,500 square foot lot, correct? For a triplex.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mhm. That's a pretty big lot.
that's a pretty big lot.
I like the idea of leaving triplexes as special review. Yeah,
That's only 3 city lots. And then,
Yep.
the original. Which would allow potentially 3 different.
Can we see the
So-
map again
Yeah.
to see RM1?
yes.
Por favor.
is it Cowden?
What's that?
I wonder if, I don't remember what zone district
Oh.
Cowden is in.
I think there's a lot of density there.
There is, but would you be allowed a triplex there without much fuss?
So RM1 is this color?
The orange?
Okay, so it's not.
Yes.
It's Russ.
And the gray is,
This gray,
no,
That's our,
The brownie gray?
this,
yeah,
Wait,
light industrial.
which one?
The brand.
is
No, that's
R1?
against the river.
RM1
RM1
is
is the-
this,
They call it
Orange. dark
Oh,
yellow,
orange,
whatever.
okay,
burnt orange.
burnt orange. burnt
And then
is
just slowly scroll down throughout town because that's a big district.
It is.
You know, I think about my neighborhood, which is right on the river and has, you know, the setback thing. Which was designed to protect the river. But then do you want to have a lot more people in that area? I mean, isn't that an impact on the river that should be avoided?
Well, you have
In addition
towns
to the
there
setback.
already, right?
Pardon me?
Yeah. Like up near the 27th Street Bridge, there's a lot of density
There is, yeah,
right on.
right. Mhm. Yeah, that's existing.
There's senior housing.
I mean, how many of those lots in the orange, like where are the 738 lots that available to be put a triplex on? I mean,
Most of those.
Yeah, most of those.
so
would-
how many will
Because
actually do that?
they're big lots, so.
How many total
How many
RM1
people
lots?
do, that's another question, but, you know, devil's advocate.
Well,
Don, you want to know how many?
How many total RM1 lots are there in the city? Do you know roughly?
988.
988.
In RM1.
700.
And 738 are eligible for a duplex.
So does it go
For
further down?
triplex.
Are there more RM1 south from where you should know? That's about the limit of
I think
it.
there's.
Lots are
Oh,
popular.
there's some small.
So Sky
But
Ranch.
the incentive. I mean, the incentives are, I mean, I don't know, I feel like it just outweighs. Like making it go to a special review. Just
Well, it
because-
doesn't prevent it. It just says, is it appropriate on that particular location?
Can you quickly go back over what, to go through a
1, 2, 3.
special use permit, what has to happen? Do the applicants have to come to us for approval?
That's right. They would have to make an application and prepare a number of materials. They would incur expenses like an architect, probably a geotechnical report would be required. 8-week approval process, public hearing before you all. So it is a barrier.
Yeah, that's excessive. I think that we keep it as written, in my opinion.
I do too.
And they're already required as proposed, to provide one deed restricted unit. I think it would be,
Awesome.
you know. I think it would be dead on arrival if they had to go through an onerous process to, sorry, not to say you all aren't pleasant to work with. But
Be candid, we like that better.
Look in the mirror.
But
Yeah.
I just think one deed restriction is already relatively onerous for, you know, we're talking 33% of your units are deed restricted if you're building a triplex. And our inclusionary zoning requires 10%. Or 20%, depending on ownership versus rental, but
Yeah. And I guess I understand and kind of go with the feeling that there's already a lot of, I mean, especially the parking's huge. I think
Mhm.
parking's really complicated. I mean, you got all those units. I guess one thing that I didn't kind of talk about, but you know, when we talk about that it's affordability and now we throw, you know, I think having the one deed restricted, to me, that's the only real affordability that's there. You know, I mean, to me, it really seems like all we're doing is we're adding more units. You know, we're, you know, saying that it's more affordable. You know, one of the things you didn't go through, but you had the, in your staff report, you had the Garfield County rents for 0, 1, 2, 3, and it's, you know, what's affordable? It's like, Jesus, things really aren't affordable.
Is the
I'm
deed
gonna
restriction
jump in with
100?
Just one thing, and we have a staff recommendation tonight on the affordability of that third unit. There is a component that we have in our inclusionary zoning called resident occupancy, and it might be something that you want to think about tonight. Deed restrictions can take many forms. They can be resident occupancy restricted. It can be affordability restricted. And if you're possibly interested in that as a component, you could make a recommendation that the units be resident occupied, all of them, some of them, none of them, in addition to affordability or depending at certain levels. So if that is something, and you saw comments in our, in the feedback on the survey, you know, there is concern for whether or not we are housing Up Valley residents or not. And if you are of the same mind of that concern, resident occupancy is certainly a tool that we have to mitigate that.
So, I mean, you could, I mean, I kind of like that myself, but it is that, so you could have that on a duplex, that if you did another one, the owner needs to be in one, is that what you're saying?
Well, I think what we're saying, and actually, I'm going to advocate kind of a personal opinion here. With this upzoning, frankly, I think you make both units or all three units need to be either deed restricted or RO. I mean, a resident occupied is a pretty straightforward. If you're taking advantage of that upzoning, our goal is to try to get more housing for workforce in Glenwood. That RO restriction on both or all, you know, I mean, if it's a duplex on both, or if it's a triplex, the one deed restricted to an AMI and 2 ROs, that's actually accomplishing something with that. I think that's a different section of what we're working on. I guess the other thing I'd kind of wrap this one on, if you guys are good with the zoning conversation where it's at, I think we can move on to some of the other sections, because I don't think I see more than 3 or 2 that want to move triplexes to special review use. Is that what I'm reading up there?
At what point do we talk about resident ownership, however,
The next.
for the first
Yeah,
item?
Right.
So what's the question?
The question-
I love naked sauce.
No,
Kind
I
of
think,
structurally in Pete's going through this, you know, I just wanted to kind of put to bed the question of special.
Of the
review use or
upzoning.
Not.
Yeah.
With regard to the upzoning, so that we could move on to the next issue, knowing that we had finished that one.
do we need to just do a verbal of who would want to keep it as a special?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think let's just see kind of where you guys are
Yeah.
at,
Okay,
Okay,
or just kind of do a quick straw poll on, you know, show of hands, who wants to move it to keep it as a special review.
For triplexes in
For
R1.
triplexes. Yeah,
So
so don't raise your hand.
I was
You too?
with you on that, and I think if we could sort of compromise by mandating resident occupancy, I'd be willing to skip the special review.
good.
All right, there you go.
so are we saying
Yes.
resident occupied for the one deed restricted unit?
How about all of them
How-
Both or all 3?
How can they all be resident occupied?
in city? of
Resident occupied, yeah. doesn't mean owner.
Resident occupancy is not owner occupied. That's not not something that we would.
It's just
They
want
work
to
here?
afford.
not
Yeah,
3
they
months
work-
out of
Oh,
the year
the
for it.
title is very misleading.
Well, that's what we have already. We already have.
we have our.
I know I've
it's
done
our-
that before.
right?
So you're like, they're living
In
here.
South
They are.
Glenwood, there's
Yeah.
part of that you're in the zip code, in the,
You're working the zip code.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
typically what we require.
or the area code.
Okay.
But it's not a summer home for
Whatever.
Mr.
It's not a
Florida.
summer home, You have to occupy
Zip
it for
code.
6.
Zip
I think
code.
it's 6 months
Yeah,
out of
the
the
area
year.
code's huge.
You have to work in the zip code, so it truly means it becomes, you have to be.
No comments. from-
Except if you're retired.
There's some provision.
Hmm.
Okay. I like that.
So that is the definition of resident occupied.
Yes.
Yeah.
The zip code.
I still think making all 3 of them resident occupied is a little onerous, but that's just me.
the whole point of it.
I get it,
Is exactly
but
the point of what we're doing.
of course. But I feel like that's just really kind of infringing on property rights, but
Just build a duplex then.
Or just, I mean, I think we were talking about even using it in the duplexes. What I would suggest is that oftentimes I'm going to use kind of special review or conditional use criteria. If you think in your head, we're providing a large upzoning,
right.
Yeah,
which is increasing the value and the availability of, you know, that property owner
Mhm.
to create a new unit. That's a huge thing for them financially.
Mhm.
To extract something for the community out of that, I don't think is an unfair, I wouldn't feel too bad about it
Mhm.
necessarily. It's totally up to you guys what you want to recommend, but that trade-off, you're giving them a huge benefit with what you
Right.
just decided to move forward with upzoning.
yeah.
Yeah.
And more people will be able to afford to do that as about, you know what I mean? So you are it's such a huge incentive that I also do not feel bad doing that.
Well, and it also
And
makes
it's-
you do your rents as you're doing your rents.
Yeah. Cause you don't have to
you
live
need have
here
the-
as
you
the
need to have people
builder.
that-
Yeah,
I will say some of this, I think some of the subtext that's not been explicitly said is that in theory, with supply and demand, more supply will lower rents. In
Yep.
theory, that's obviously
theoretical,
extremely simplified.
theoretically unlimited.
But I, yeah, and, you know, I guess some, and Amy's kind of talked at this, but I think the number of units we're gonna get out of this are, and George kind of talked about this, I think they're gonna be very small.
It's certainly not going to be
Yeah,
overnight.
it's not,
Yes,
so I
tomorrow,
think from a,
700.
well, I think from a supply and demand, it's gonna be low.
triplexes.
I guess
Oh my
one
God.
question I would have on the residence thing, so I know I did some of those 4 years ago or whatever, but so how is that managed? So it's like I thought it was like every year there was, is it Garfield County Housing does that or
We talked
something, and
about
they check where you're working and
Yeah, we contract with Garfield County Housing Authority to run the compliance components of our inclusionary zoning and our voluntary programs. So they do check in once a year on those programs to make sure the residents are still qualifying.
So then if you stop working here and find a better job, then you're out of your housing.
In a gentle way.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
No, unless somebody who lives in there is
I don't like it.
Yeah, so,
Some
cause that
people are
happens a
single.
lot. But she just brought up a really good point about the voluntary program. There's people who actually sign up for this so that they get these incentives. You know, so. So we could
Okay.
change that narrative.
So are we ready to move on to,
well, first
next
off, are
item?
we gonna agree with this, with the residents?
well, I think does that fall into,
I think I'm the
What
only
are the
one
other
that does
categories?
recruiting. I think
Yeah.
that I agree with two, but I think that even if you were a second homeowner, I think having a place where you could land when you love our town and come to town makes sense, and then have the other 2 units be resident occupied. To me, that also makes logical sense than having all 3 of them have to be resident
What
occupied.
about on the duplex? What do you think on the duplex?
The duplex. Oh, shifting gears, I'm getting palpitations. I do need to use the bathroom. Can we take a break?
we can take a break. Sure.
Thank you.
That'd be
You guys
great.
want to finish this RO one and then take a break?
Okay, I'm
That's
okay
a
with
good
that.
idea.
I can, yeah.
Don't forget where
I mean,
we're at.
these-
Sorry, I brought up the break and then I pulled it back.
And these are people who already own their properties, who are going to hopefully come forward and change their property.
They can
right?
buy a new property and do.
Yeah, I guess they
Yeah.
could buy a new
They could rent
property.
out all 3 to people that work within this.
What if you're a homeowner and you're living in one and you don't, what's that?
That's resident, that's RO.
But what if you work in Basalt?
That's what I mean. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, RO means that the person who lives there full time and works within we have a tier, so basically works in Glenwood.
Yeah, I don't think that
Yeah,
that's,
so maybe if I can articulate, I think what
Yeah.
you're thinking through in your head is that perhaps the compromise position is that in a duplex, at least 1 unit has to be RO restricted. In a triplex, at
Two.
least 2 have to be.
Correct.
RO restricted.
Cause you said 2 or 1, and so I agree with you, Joy,
Yeah.
on that point, because a lot of people do, if you look at our survey, drive up Valley to go to work.
And they're still going to,
And they're still going to, they're not going to stop.
but that's how they can afford a house in Glenwood.
And maybe their wife or husband or kids work here, or
Or maybe
Partner.
they're single.
or they're single and their dogs go to daycare here. I don't
Maybe their dogs work here.
In light of explaining it that way, like if you work at Basalt and you've managed to buy a house here in Glenwood, we don't want to make you leave your good paying long-term job in Basalt in order to build another unit. Right,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the counter argument is you just don't build the other unit.
right. But then you have less income and,
Right. if
you
you're
know, you're
There again.
grandma
if I-
can't live
so
there.
Maybe the compromise position is 1 of 2 in a duplex, 2 of 3 in a triplex.
I'll take it.
We've also discussed deed restrictions where it's like tiered, right? Where you start with the RO. But there's also another maybe affordability attached to it as a secondary criteria. Could you make it optional where it's either RO or it is affordability attached?
Certainly.
So you could choose one or the other as a
80
homeowner. I think that
80%.
might be a great approach.
Yeah, 80% or RO?
Yeah, and that's how our inclusionary zoning started out. We had 2 different categories, so
Yeah.
20%
I like
needed
that
to be.
better.
20% needed to be RO, of which 10% needed to be affordable. We've changed some of those components for rental.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have both together. They could be separate if you.
So
desire.
what's the affordable, what percentage of AMI?
We get to decide, right?
100.
100.
It was 100, right?
That was what was highlighted in all your,
But we could make it 80.
And we can make it be whatever we want.
You could.
right?
But I mean,
But if you look at
No.
100, 100 is still pretty,
Yeah,
I
100
mean,
is still
for
pretty
Glenwood
good.
standards, it's pretty affordable
Yeah.
still.
And I can show you that chart if you'd like.
Yeah.
yeah, why don't you put that?
Yeah, let's see. Let's see, because I don't consider it very affordable for a single person, one income.
Me,
You know, I printed it.
Well, it's not ever gonna be what we want it to be affordable, but in terms of like compared to
What?
market rent, it is
Oh, it's-
less than,
It's great compared to market
Yeah.
rent, but compared to what your actual income is, you
Gonna
know,
have to make
it's still,
that big.
yeah.
it's kind of small. There. Not too much.
That's good.
There you go.
So the highlighted is 100% AMI. The way you read this chart is to the left side is what's rent. Let's focus on the right side, which is the estimated income based on affordability. So for a 1-person household, 69,500 is considered 100% AMI for this year, for 2023. You move to the right, 2-person, that's what's considered 100% AMI and so on.
So Watkins, how does this relate to the burdened households? It really doesn't, does it? I mean, or how is that calculation done? What do we say? 36% or whatever that percentage was of from your housing
Right, yeah.
to pay.
What that statistic is saying is 38% of people are paying more than 30% of their household income on housing expenses. So that's actually the left side of what I was showing you. The maximum rent is, if you are a family, 100% AMI and you're living in a 1-bedroom house, so it's by housing type, this is what you are estimated to be. That's 30% of your income.
So a teacher makes about $55,000 a year.
So they're not gonna get in 100% AMI.
Mm-mm.
They'll
That's
like
the starting wage.
get
Yeah,
in
they
at
just upped
80.
it.
Yeah.
You better be married and have a working dog.
And you better not need family.
And you have 2 kids that can work too.
So maybe we propose that the 2 options are you rent at 80% AMI. Or you make it a resident occupied, am I saying that right?
I can get on board
Um,
with that.
Designation.
So if you're 80% AMI, are you also working in 816?
Or-
No.
One or the other.
One or the other.
Ors, we're gonna, I mean,
So that's,
Affordable
that
What
can
are
be
you
of
gonna
not,
do?
not solving the problem
it really
for
is.
Glenwood Springs.
Or,
Well, it's providing an affordable housing unit or it's providing a resident occupied unit. So I think it is.
oh, I see what you're saying.
I
And
think
you
the-
as a homeowner have a little bit of
Okay.
buy-in to which option you choose, which I think
I got
makes people
lost.
feel
People
better.
do like choices.
They do love choices, even toddlers like choices.
I think the point that Chair Shaver was mentioning, just so that we're all clear, if you put an affordability restriction on it, say 80% AMI, and you don't have the resident occupancy, then it's open to anyone that works anywhere.
Mhm.
Aspen, Rifle, Parachute. So it is open. There are choices, but that's the difference. It'll be affordable to anyone,
Mhm.
not necessarily a focus on Glenwood or 81601.
So we're increasing the density, but not solving our housing problem
For us.
for residents. I don't get that. See where that's solving anything. that's putting people back on the highway. Potentially.
Or we could be eliminating someone commuting from Newcastle and having to drive. Eliminating commuter traffic through the canyon or what have you.
It seems like that's
I don't know.
less.
I'd like
Less
to go
sure
back
of
to the
solving a
2 for
problem.
1 and 1. RO, where in a triplex, 2 should be RO and then a duplex 1. And keep it at 100%. That's what I think.
Well, that's two things, though, right?
Sorry,
Apply both.
sorry. I brought up duplex.
Well,
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Let me try to help walk through that a little bit. So on the triplex, to get that bonus, that extra unit has to be restricted to affordability.
That was the staff recommendation.
No, that's what I'm looking at you because that's what they're starting from the staff recommendation. So I think an initial question is 100% AMI where you guys want to be on the affordability question on that additional unit? Right? Are you comfortable with that? I'm getting mostly head nods, I think. All right. So that's that. Then we have, what do you do with that other bonus, that other extra unit in both a duplex and a triplex that you've moved up from single family residential?
Mhm.
You guys good with those being RO? Or do you want additional affordability restrictions in either of those categories?
As it's written, there's no RO.
Right, there's no RO, and so that's.
I'm
why-
okay with it as it's written, but I think most people are.
Quite,
I want to see an RO requirement.
quite frankly, I'm kind of grappling with is one free market unit better than no affordable units? Like,
Well, I mean, so what we're talking about, and then we just kind of go through it. So for the duplex, we have one that's free market. Right?
as
One-
proposed.
No,
by staff.
well, as we're just talking about here.
Yeah.
And that the second one is RO for just the duplex.
What we would be.
I'm just saying that's a proposal that I'm hearing.
So it could be a second homeowner from the Front Range or whatever that owns the duplex.
Yeah,
And then the
that's
other
primary,
unit.
could be that, yeah.
Okay.
And they like.
That's what it is. So I'm saying, and then for the triplex, the first one's for one of them's free market. And then one of them is a deed restricted, but both of the other two are RO.
Yes,
Because what we're trying to do, and I'm just tossing this out here, but it is we're trying to do affordable housing for Glenwood. We're trying to have housing for Glenwood. So we have RO on both of the additional 1 and the additional 2, but the triplex has deed restricted on the third
yes.
at 100%.
So that's 2, because I mean, RO is a deed restriction as well. So we're looking at
Well, we got-
an RO and.
Two of them.
Okay, one, so I think the way I would frame it is on a duplex, 1 free market, 1 RO resident occupied. On a
Yeah.
triplex, 1 free market, 1 RO, 1 affordability restricted that is going to include underneath current regulations. It's got to be an RO as well.
Or we could let it be a little more free market and just let the triplex have 2 ROs and not define those.
We do that too.
We're supposed to encourage
Which
diversity.
which is achieving a goal.
Well,
Right?
did you hear what Karen?
Right,
No,
if
I
we're
didn't.
trying to encourage diversity, then
We have to, yeah.
restricting the income would help have
Affordability.
lower income people mixed in with others, and that is a goal of our comp plan.
Well, that is true, but it's more onerous on the owner.
He's got a free market unit.
Look at the
Well-
rents, look at the rents at 100%.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, look at
Wicked.
construction costs.
Yeah,
That's,
I know,
so,
not
yeah,
anymore.
Again,
down there at like 50.
What are you thinking, John?
I mean, it's kind of an unanswerable question to me, but like, do these projects pencil if they're RO? Do they make the developer or the homeowner, whatever you want to call them, do they make the developer cash positive, or do they pencil out? Do you make money on the project?
Shouldn't matter where they live.
I
if
did
they're
one
paying rent.
4 years ago that penciled out.
I,
But that was 4 years.
I think with an RO restriction, I mean, again, anecdotally, in the several communities I work in that use ROs. I don't see that it has been a particular impediment the way an AMI restriction has been. Because the available you know, with a rental market that is at, 0.5% vacancy, I've never seen it really create that kind of an issue. Your lenders will tell you that it does, and I have lots of arguments with lenders over whether that RO restriction is above or below, is subordinate to the first mortgage or not. But that's about it. I mean, we're just not seeing it have that kind of impact on rental rates to the point where it takes you out of the market.
How many ROs do we have right now currently in? Roughly?
We have less than 100. I'm gonna say 60 something.
So
40 something.
but quite a few.
So I had a friend who was involved with the housing project up in Basalt. She lost her job and then immediately, or I know there's a time frame, like a buffer zone for her to get out of her housing, but a home that she worked on through Habitat for Humanity and purchased and spent all this time contributing to, she had to move out of because she lost her job. And to me, that's a challenge to this whole RO system. And I know, I'm sure it's successful in communities, but I have a hard time with it because of a personal experience. So I can't 100% get on board with it, but
Yeah, I could say,
an anecdote,
in general
you know?
alignment with staff recommendations. I think the one area where I could be comfortable with a deed restricted environment would be that RO, and just really kind of understanding what that would mean, as far as stipulations to try and encourage, when I see this duplex, triplex, I view this as really an opportunity to address a specific housing diversity type and opportunity for, new homeowners, people that are emerging in our community, electing to move here, starting something up. I think it presents an opportunity to enter the housing market, whereas they wouldn't be able to in a single family environment. Kind of going back to John's point about, we'd like to hope that by increasing supply, prices come down a little bit, but this is kind of a fee simple type of opportunity that is really rare in our community. And I think, this is an opportunity to do that.
Clear. I was just gonna say, Pete, you seem to have a handle on where you were going with kind of the ones and twos. It may be worthwhile to put a motion to amend the main motion on the table and see if that gets taken up and voted on, and then you guys can move on. Sometimes you just have to get to that point.
That's very stressful.
Okay, well, so is this like a sub motion?
Or
Motion to amend.
A motion to amend?
Amend the main motion, but just make a motion on it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend. This, okay, to amend that for the duplex, that we have one that's free market. And help me when I mess up, because I messed up before, like a couple months ago. Can't be.
Okay,
But
It still is not
so one is a free market and one is an RO. I'll make that a motion. And then, and that's, but it's just an RO. For the triplex, one is free market. And the other two are, I'm just gonna say RO.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. I'll second it. So a motion to amend by Commissioner Waller and a second by Commissioner Shaver. Discussion.
More discussion.
You discussed a lot.
Yeah.
No, let's a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll call the vote on the amendment. Is there anything? Oh, there it is.
And I see how everyone.
Yeah.
The motion passes with Commissioners Connerton, Sipperly, Shaver, and Waller voting for, and Commissioners Cowan, Houghton, and White voting nay.
Okay,
Oh, great.
Frank.
so now we can,
Well, and it goes to city council.
Yeah.
I know, I'm like.
That's right.
They're gonna change it all.
I think we're under recording, I believe.
Yep.
Okay. So
We have
Watkins,
6
move
of
us
these.
along.
So there's a motion on the table. The motion was to recommend the staff's recommendations. We've changed that to what you changed it to for the upzoning. And so lot standards,
Yeah, can you put that up on the
yes.
screen for us?
So we just did 1 of 6.
One of three, right?
One of 3, and then we have the 6
Then we have the others.
zoning
The third one is, yeah.
or
the third
bonus
one.
densities. Question, Hannah, can
Five.
we, I know that we're just a recommending body, but can, RO be checked less than annually? Can it be checked at the point of leasing or change of ownership?
Interesting question. So our checks right now on our programs do happen annually. And that's kind of in deference to the fact that most people are signing year leases. And also if you fall out of compliance, you know, you mentioned some circumstances, we allow someone to stay through their lease, just cannot be renewed. Doing that more than once a year might be a little cumbersome on enforcement and.
Oh, no, I'm
staff.
thinking less than
Less.
every year. I don't know.
Interesting. I'd have to think about that for a little bit.
Okay.
So this is the second one.
Okay.
The next one.
Lot standards. The motion on the table, I believe, was the staff recommendation, which is here.
The chart.
You know, I had one question and I'm probably good with it, but on the so how come in 65 it went from I don't know, 5,000 to 7 or 7 to 5? Did it change? It changed at some time and I guess one other comment I'll just kind of throw out there. I like the smaller lot size anyway, because I know it's kind of got in the way sometimes of some projects, so I changed. But anyway.
Oh, God. Were you referring to the 7,500 square feet?
Yeah, on what was it on the RM1?
That's right. There's actually a simple answer for that. Currently duplexes are allowed and nothing else. And so it wasn't that number doesn't consider triplexes. So the way it is right now, before any changes are made, you have to have a lot of 7,500 square feet in RM1 to be eligible for a duplex if it's approved by P and Z. So this proposal allows triplexes, and so we reduce that size.
And it just does 2,500 square foot per unit if you do. Yeah, okay. Okay, good.
I don't
So
mind this.
comments regarding this
I mean,
aspect?
we kind of almost have to go with this, otherwise what we just did doesn't line up, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just-
You
I mean,
can change
let's
the
vote on it.
numbers, but
Let's
you
vote
need
on it. We're good with it.
Right,
You
the
need the
landscape area
numbers.
could probably be debated, but I'm good with that. I'm good.
Okay.
You wouldn't have to change
Altering
the
this would
40,000
severely
to 20.
reduce the eligible properties,
Yeah, it would
and that's why
severely
staff
reduce
is
what we
proposing it.
did. Okay,
vis-a-vis RM1, right? The 40 to 20 and RR is not impacted with what we've already done, right?
Good point, yes.
But I mean, I don't think, is there anybody that has a problem with that aspect of it?
So we're not changing residential low density lot area.
Correct.
Not on one chart. I saw that chopped in half, but it must have been a different chart.
this is 0.070.030. Is that right? Am I right?
I don't know.
A part of our,
The tape.
oh my God.
I don't know.
You can
It's just
see-
really this table. I mean, that's all we're just. gonna
Yeah,
say.
we're
Yeah.
just, yeah.
So
and
we're
also,
affecting RH and RT now, which we weren't talking about before.
we discussed it a little bit in the presentation, but that's right.
But I mean, yeah,
And just one other little clarification, it's this chart that we're talking about and also that a technical change, changing the definition of multifamily development.
Okay.
What, so just to RH and RT. Let's just talk about that a minute. Can you show on the map what those are?
Yep. Getting faster with this. RT is a pretty light color. Here's one example. Do we have some around Valley View? I remember, yep. And RH you asked about?
Yeah, so in RH, we're talking about lot areas from 4,500 to 3,000
Right.
and 2,250 to 2.
Yep. And so RH is it's actually easy to identify. It's this brown color.
So RT sort of skirts around downtown.
It's a number of places. On where I live over here.
And while Watkins is looking at the map, just so you guys are aware of what RH and RT is meant to do, and I can read out the intent in our code, but it does stand for residential high density and residential transitional zones. So they are higher density zones, and when staff was augmenting some of these numbers, if we're changing the allowances in our lower density zones, then we wouldn't want to leave our higher density zones at a higher level. So we were making changes across the board so that it all is in line with that thinking.
More or less proportional.
Wish they'd put the map right here in 070 near the zoning district.
Noted.
Trying to find it.
Okay. Ready. Is everybody okay to move on with things?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Okay.
the chart.
I like that vote. That's the thumbs up vote.
Yeah.
We don't have to vote on that?
It's all part of the.
We're good.
well,
We already
Okay.
did. We didn't amend this one.
So density bonus is the last part of the recommended changes, and this is where there were 6 recommended changes to the density bonus.
What does the IZ mean again?
Inclusionary zoning.
Inclusionary.
10 and under.
Yeah, I thought it was trying to write 10.
So what does 10 currently mean? Does that mean, I mean, that's, I mean, we could, just like anything, it could change at any time.
And that's why I wanted it to match what the inclusionary zoning is, in case in the future it changes from 10 to 7. And you all remember that discussion earlier this year.
Yes. So right now it's 10 and over, or is it?
10.
Okay,
It's the threshold.
that's,
10 and
that?
over. It's
yeah, I remember
10,
that.
10 period.
That's
10
where the
10 and
affordable
over,
housing
like you
kicks
said.
in.
So the what that mean, number one means that there's no deed restricted unit in right now between 3 and 10, is that right?
None is required to be provided right now.
Right, so if you add one, then you get the bonus.
Yes.
Except for we just made a recommendation to add the deed restriction to the 2 of the triplex. Is that correct?
No,
Oh, this is density bonus, a totally different subject.
Just a
Sorry.
reminder that density bonus is citywide regardless of zone district.
So then would you be provided that density bonus on that triplex? That is now,
You know, I think this is meant to say more than 3, actually. It says between 3, so.
More than 3.
3, yeah,
4 to 9.
4 to 9.
should be
Okay.
4.
Thank you.
Or 4 to 10.
Including 4.
Is it, it's 10 and above where it kicks in
Yes.
now, right?
Okay,
Yes.
so it's 4 to 9. That might be good to just,
So you could be 33 feet high. Under the number 1.
A
Where-
lot of zone
where-
districts,
Yeah,
a lot of zone districts have 27 feet as the max, not all. of them.
what, yeah, which ones don't? Just the downtown?
I believe M1 is, well, I shouldn't say that. before we can-
So let's see. RR, RL, RM1, RM2 are all 27 feet height restriction. We jump to 40 when you get to our higher density RH and RT.
So 46 or 52 or 72. I'm still hung up on that theoretically unlimited flexibility.
Could we change that language
Let's
to
do one at a
state?
time.
Yeah.
Let's
okay.
do one.
You're right. Can we
I'm
just
good
say-
with
can we
one.
Just say.
Are we good with one?
Yes.
I'm good with one.
Two.
Everybody?
Are we saying what kind of deed restriction?
Oh, yeah, we should specify that.
It says one.
Oh,
framework.
no, I mean, yours
Plus
is, do we do the?
Yeah, do we do the income
Occupants.
based or?
Or resident occupancy?
I think affordability was,
Yeah.
that was my intent thinking about this.
And it was at the 100% is what you
100%.
thought?
That's
And
deep.
affordability, including resident occupancy.
Okay.
So resident
Both.
occupancy
So both.
and affordability.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay, good.
So did we add RO in this?
no.
No, that was assumed in our record.
That was assumed. Okay. Oh.
Implied.
Well, we
I
could
never
add,
assumed.
Never assume anything.
we could add that to the recommendation.
I mean, I was.
Yeah. A
We'll let the
clarification.
record show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you better.
okay.
Okay, now I have a quick sidebar, and so on all of the conversation we had before, because we didn't vote the same, but I think there was great conversation. So do you capture all of that conversation and it goes to council? So that they hear, you know, on the duplex and triplex, here's the different options. So they hear, here's the, because I think we had a great conversation on it. So I just want to make sure that all of that goes.
Yeah, and that along with doing Richard's tonight, obviously part of why I'm here tonight, because it's helpful for me as they're asking me questions, so they're here for your discussion.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
okay, so number 2.
So we're good with one, right? Everybody?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I just,
So just to comment on what Commissioner Shaver said on theoretically unlimited flexibility. Could we change the language to state something? And I know that this language is already in the density bonus language, but could we add something that says flexibility per administrative review or approval? That would at least-
First 2 words.
Actually,
Flexibility in design.
it's at the discretion of the deciding body right now. So if, like in the Habitat project, they asked for some flexibility, you all were, were the deciding body.
Mm.
And so you could have said no to that flexibility.
So could we
so can we
maybe
flexible-
incorporate that language into the?
So in other words, can we just say flexibility?
And
for
not
design
unlimited?
standards?
It doesn't say that in the code, you know, theoretically unlimited. I put it this way so that it's brutally.
So that, so.
Oh, got it.
So that we're.
Looking at lots.
He's like existing non-conforming t-shirt, but.
So what Watkins is pointing out here is that currently we don't have parameters on our
Got it.
flexibility.
Okay,
And so what you saw in that previous application, you know, they could ask for more. They didn't. And obviously staff would have feelings if it got too out of hand, but it is at the discretion of the approving authority.
I think
Currently,
we thought maybe the language would be exactly that, right?
I
On
think
some
the
level,
language is-
which is a little terrifying.
well,
Right.
that, and you did say that they could ask for anything. And then,
People can always do.
yeah, I guess they could
Yeah,
always do
and that's, I
that.
was gonna say, they can ask.
Yeah.
You or the director
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
it doesn't have to agree with what they've asked for in that flexibility. The one upside to that is it does allow for creativity in addressing a particular site. And
okay,
that, I think, opens a better dialogue between you and an applicant maybe
Yeah.
about what works and what doesn't.
Doesn't look great with general public, I think, theoretically unlimited.
They're taking that language out. It's not gonna be in.
And I think that we just need to be careful, and we will as we move this forward, because there's gonna be a lot more people in the room the next time. To maybe not say, theoretically unlimited, but that the request, they can request.
I mean, just flexibility. is a
Request
great word.
flexibility, but
Yeah.
that the deciding body is not obligated to agree with that.
And then does the
That's perfect
same
language.
thing apply? Are we saying 4 through 9 on that one as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Okay.
for all of these, okay, great.
Since this applies to any zone district, at the higher density ones, then we could be looking at 52-foot tall buildings with this 12 additional feet, so 52 feet. Are we okay with that? 12 on top of an already allowable 40-foot to midspan of gable? I mean, that could actually be more like a 60-foot top of the roof in 2 zone districts that are allowed 40 feet height right now. I mean, I just want to point that out. That could be very tall.
And just to comment on that, I think Watkins may have a slide or in the staff report, the differences between our current density bonus and what we're proposing. Currently, we allow 1 full story addition under our density bonus.
So this is like a story and a half.
Which is 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
12
Oh,
feet
just
is
over
not going
one.
to allow a story and a half. It's
Yeah.
what 1 story has actually grown to over the years. It used to be 10 feet, but everything that goes into the building now, it's really 12 feet per story.
So it's essentially 1 story, so it's not very different from what we have.
8-foot ceiling and 2 feet of structure.
People are
Okay,
getting
I have
taller.
another question on, so one of the things in your staff report, you talked about greenfield and infill. And so I get that. And so you talked about this being infill. So if you're doing 4 to 10, I guess I didn't get that. How's that? How is this infill? An infill project versus a greenfield? I mean, if you're doing 10 units, I mean, that's a lot, that's a lot of units or 9 units. It's not 10, but
Yeah, greenfield is more about where it is. Is it on the outskirts of the city? Is it raw land that's being developed? And you make a good point. I suppose since this is citywide, it could apply to greenfield as well.
yeah, I mean, 4 to 9, I mean, could easily be a greenfield kind of thing. You have some little.
Sure.
But again, whether it's 9 units, something pretty dense, that could happen inside the city or that could
Yeah.
happen in Raleigh.
Right.
Okay. That's
Okay.
good.
So are we good with 2?
I am.
I like it.
Let's go.
Let's
I
go. I like that
You have a
language.
question?
I have just sort of a conceptual question, make sure I'm understanding and picturing this properly. And I really hate to open this can of worms, but are we saying that, for example, the RM2 zone district with the triplex provisions that we just approved or voted on, that a triplex would need to have 2 RO units and 4 units would have nothing? No deed restriction requirements.
Run those numbers by me again. So draw a square.
How many total units do we have for the proposed?
Like, if you have a site in the RM2 district and it can accommodate both a 4-unit building and a triplex, and you build the triplex, you're required, based on our recommendation, you would be required to have 2 deed restricted units in that triplex.
So in RM2, remember the changes you recommended before were just to RM1, RR, and RL. So in RM2, multifamily is allowed currently, and no changes have been
Okay.
recommended for that. So
Yeah,
that would.
thank you. I'm glad you clarified that. I just wanted to make sure it sort of passed the sanity check.
Yeah, you have to second guess in a minute there.
Yeah.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
But with the fourplex, until you get up to number 10, you don't have to deed restrict any.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another day.
Okay. Number 3.
So again, both of these should say
30
30%.
instead of 30.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Good one, Walker. Minute.
Who paid you to do that? Is this on?
It is.
It's a big, big.
It's called the hot
focus.
mic there,
So
Peter.
transit stops are somewhat transient sometimes, like if you look at the one outside of the Forest Service building, it used to be a raft stop. Now it's a Ride Glenwood stop. But what if it goes away and you've got a building there, then something could change.
That's the risk we run with redevelopment. The way I think we would apply that is at the time that someone wants to do a project is their transit stop. If it goes away, then we don't make them take out that
There
bonus.
never was one right out front here up until a couple of years ago. So as long as it's in place when the permit is turned in or approved, then we'll count it.
And just for reference, we have this as a category for a parking reduction. And that is within 750 feet. So this is getting a little bit, closer to transit. And you make a great point that, things can change and it might not always be there.
Probably don't have a map of all the transit spots with 500-foot radius circles around them, like the weed store map,
We can do that.
but yeah.
Like the weed store.
Yeah. It's all like blah, 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 blah,
Yeah,
blah.
like how
The
many
buffer
lots
zone.
are there along a transit stop? For real.
Are there really many
Are there
properties?
There,
Well, Safeway,
good point. That is does it still stop? Oh, it does stop there. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
Right before Starbucks.
So is this also 4 to 9? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say that like you had. Yes, okay,
Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Ready to
We're
go.
good with 3. Moving along.
A free market.
I had
bonus
one more.
Unit. We sure we want it. free?
Ask it, John. Ask it.
Go ahead.
If you're at 9 units and you get a bonus unit, are you then subject to the inclusionary zoning?
The way I would apply that would be no.
Okay.
Make sure these guys apply it the same way.
And we're okay with that being a free market unit.
Hannah and Carl, did you hear the question?
Oh,
Go ahead, John.
I had just asked if you're at 9 units and you get a free market unit, are you then subject to inclusionary zoning? And
No.
No.
It's like. It's like anything you want.
I'm not gonna speak for Carl, but I was playing through that in my mind. If we're giving you a bonus unit, then we're not gonna trigger this.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Richard doesn't crack
You're
up
feeling
like this.
silly, Carl. You're feeling silly.
You don't,
I have a similar approach.
you don't get it. Don't get it.
And we're okay with it being a free market.
Yes,
Yes.
500 feet is already pretty restrictive, I feel like.
Mhm.
yeah. Good luck.
Okay.
Hey, 4.
Okay.
Oh, that one's just good.
That'll never happen.
That'll never happen.
That never happened.
Well,
30%, that should also be 30%,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
We should give them 10 free market.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
go
Good luck.
keep building.
You can.
could
Ah.
recommend more than one.
Stop. Yeah, don't give us more.
Well, I mean, for sale, how many for sale
Yeah.
units have we
Residential.
had? I mean, we've had Habitat's gonna happen.
Yep,
There was gonna be one where the Rivers was, and that's
But now it's not.
since bye-bye.
yep.
We've had 2 for sale projects in the last 6 years.
Oh
Last
my
time.
God.
So the
my
damn
God.
condo laws,
Yeah, it's,
Sure.
I was.
which might change.
yeah, I mean, I do think that, I think the legislative goal for this session is to try to address this a little bit. I don't know if we're gonna get there or not. But I think it's good to sort of plan to have that in place. And frankly, this would give me a little bit of leverage when I talk to legislators about
Yeah.
what we need to get done. But like, look, we have communities trying to make this happen, but we need your help.
Shall we make it 2 units?
Can we say 2 units?
Say whatever.
And can we also provide the height
Yeah. the
bonus
height thing?
because you might want
Drastically infinity.
flexibility and
Theoretically,
addition.
I
Build
love
to
that
the
idea.
moon.
Give
No,
them
but you
the
might
height.
need, you
To
might not
pop
have a
up.
large enough lot you might.
I
need
think
more.
if you guys want to view this as adding more incentives for sale projects.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly, we can add some
This is-
additional components.
Yeah, let's
there.
give them 2 units and 12 feet.
yep,
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree.
See what happens.
Let's.
Who wants to place a bet as to when it
Speaking
happens?
of unlimited flexibility,
For power, Carolyn.
it's going right to her head. is
How
what's
soon? How
happening.
soon?
So are we good
Okay.
with that? So
We're good with that one. Four.
Density
Moving along.
bonus.
We good with,
But
Whoa.
So we're gonna amend that.
we're gonna-
Good job. I see the change.
I can,
wasn't gonna do it, but we're kind of in the middle of a motion. Somebody just throw out.
yeah, can I amend, this, the original motion to include, with the density bonus, number 4, projects between 3 and
9,
4 and 9.
sorry, 4 and 9.
including.
Threshold offering 100% for sale residential units. The bonus will be 2 free market bonus units, 12 feet height. And then what's stated in the staff recommendations for zone districts.
second,
Okay, we have a motion to amend by Commissioner Connerton and a second by Commissioner Waller. Any further discussion? Call the question.
Do we need to amend to have all those?
She captured it.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Oops. You can say that. There wasn't a bad oops.
The motion passes.
Okay.
Did you want to keep going through?
Yes, we're not done yet.
We're on a roll.
Good, number 5.
so what is the number at the top? So this project subject to
Inclusionary zoning.
10,
Anything
Okay,
over
10
10,
plus.
but what is the percentage? Do we up it to 20%?
10 for sale, 20%.
Okay,
So you do.
yep, 20% for rental, okay. So if they want to provide 40% or 20% for sale,
Okay,
then we would,
add 5% of the total unit count. So if it's 20, we
Yeah.
get
mm-hmm,
1.
12 additional feet in height.
yep.
Theoretically, unlimited flexibility.
There you go. So
There you
I feel
go.
good about
So,
that.
so 5%, it's not, that's not very much, right? So
Would
that's-
you all like to see some numbers that illustrate this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, look how much more we have to do.
this is so exciting. Oh, okay, this makes sense.
it's a good slide. Watkins.
That's a good slide, good
Oh,
job.
yeah, this is helpful.
So 5%
great.
isn't very much. It's not very much, though. If you're doubling the amount of deed restriction, I think
Yeah,
5% is kind of low. That's my. I agree.
Yeah.
So then.
Because look, I
increase
mean,
it to
let, I
10.
mean, let's say you build 25 units, you double the amount of deed restriction, shoot from 20 to 40%. I mean, that's huge.
No,
yeah.
Yeah, you should get a big.
That's not much of an
Can,
incentive.
can we ask why you staff recommended 5%?
Wanted to strike a balance between incentivizing and freaking people out about having too many additional units.
I see, I
mhm.
see.
The freak out factor.
The freak out factor is interesting.
We have that on the whole thing.
Yeah.
I propose doing it 10%. It just doubles that. I mean,
That seems fair.
I'd second it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Motion.
Go ahead and make a motion,
okay, put the other
Commissioner.
thing back up there.
Waller.
So I'll make a motion to amend project subject to 10 or more units that provide double the number of deed restricted units required. The bonus the free market units are equivalent, go to 10% project's total count. But still 12 additional feet and also scratch theoretically unlimited and just have flexibility for design standards, minimum lot size, et cetera.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Waller and a second by Commissioner Sipperly. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Motion passes
Okay,
unanimously.
number 6, modification to standards. Only offered. Any comments on that?
That's logical. That's what we've been talking about all along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Although the transit,
Is there language that we should add here that somehow clarifies that offering these bonuses does not
guarantee.
require more additional help, like does not kick you into providing additional affordable housing? Is there a way to even
We will, we will definitely be looking at.
work on that?
There's gonna be some words.
Okay.
All this. Make it flow.
the transit option did not require a deed restriction, right?
Right.
Isn't that a density bonus incentive that's offered without a deed restriction?
True.
Go back. Ooh, that dang transit stop thing. Yes, it definitely.
It's
But
free
it's not
market.
required, is it?
Well, it is a density bonus and it is offered
only offered-
without deed restriction.
Well, it still would be, so we're talking about the 9, because if you're over that, you're going to be building to the inclusionary zoning anyway. Right?
It's not required, what you're getting, in the 49 category.
Right, and well, yeah, so. You get a one,
I see.
yeah, so this is in the 4 to 9. I think is what it's limited to, right?
No, this was.
So you get
well,
only one for market bonus.
Actually, we did, you all did say you wanted this to be 4 to 9. That was the discussion, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, so
Joy,
that's why I was like,
Commissioner White
it's
said
like-
that.
I think we need to do anything with it necessarily if you're in that 4 to 9 category.
No, I think what John is stating is that
It's
the
not.
traffic bonus doesn't require that, but this is stating that it's,
It has to.
So
it has
number
to.
6 is saying, that is not required. So clarification of standards, density bonus incentives are only offered when deed restriction is included that is not required. If you're in 4 to 9 units, it's not required. And so it would be a voluntary aspect and be able to be included.
Oh, okay.
So
That makes
it's
sense.
a double negative-ish.
It is, it can be.
But the traffic one doesn't require,
Deed restriction.
Deed
So I think we
restriction.
can- I think we can word.
Neither
fit
does 4 to
this.
9 units.
It's-
Hence the double.
okay,
Well-
you get it, you figure it out.
I think
If I were just like that, add in, make it all work together correctly, that's really. what it
Perfect.
says.
This could be wordsmith just so.
I'll vote for that.
Yeah,
I mean, I think deed restricted is included is what tripped me up.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think
It
we're
should say deed
we're trying to
restriction.
Say we're gonna try to make everything just happen.
Yeah. Be cohesive. Yep.
Making sense is
Okay.
good.
Did we vote on that or do we still have? to?
No, we still
We're
have to
good with-
vote on
The
the main motion.
The end of the main motion.
And this is the amended.
This is as amended, so the main,
As
the main
amended.
motion,
A bunch of
that's the
times.
whole point of all these.
Yeah.
And Robert's rule.
Okay, so-
All those motions. The main motion is still on the table, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been amended with all of those changes, so you don't have to do anything other than vote.
Thank you.
Yay.
Okay. Okay.
Just be quiet and vote.
Cause I don't want to read that all
Oh,
day.
that's hard. Okay, so call the question on the original motion.
As amended.
Well, back to the original motion that I made, which was I recommend approval of the text changes, including amendments to the municipal code section 070. Now I don't have to.
You literally have.
Push the button.
Sorry. Thank you.
You don't need to say
anything. I-
We got it.
Zip it.
You just need to vote.
Give us the button.
Just
Let's get working.
So let's vote.
Longer you try to-
let us go forward.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
The motion passes unanimously.
Good.
good job.
I gotta tell you guys, that was impressive. I mean, no, seriously, like from the standpoint of this is a really tough subject. You guys worked through it and it was super thoughtful, like Pete said. I'm hoping that that carries forward and council understands the work that went into it, you guys.
I hope so too. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you. Commissioner comments, Commissioner Sipperly.
No, I just hope that this doesn't have any negative effect on historic neighborhoods. But I'm glad that we worked through this, and I think it really has the potential to help out a lot of our neighbors in getting local housing.
I concur. Thank you.
I just had one thing I wanted to bring up. I just feel like there's been a lot of comments in the community about the rate or the disturbance of the hillside with the new that project up above Lowe's. And I feel like when we were presented with the packet, it was a very, we saw the finished product. We maybe didn't understand how disturbed the landscape would be. And I just wonder if there are in the packets where we presented with kind of a map of disturbance of what construction would look like. I just feel like the general public would be better prepared for, a year plus of a destroyed hillside.
So as part of our application requirements, a development is required to identify their limits of disturbance on a site plan. So that was in the package for the various developments that we have going up around town. If it's something that you would like highlighted a little bit more, obviously this particular project is very large. We can certainly do that in staff presentations and reports so that you understand not just where the buildings are going to go, but how it's going to look during construction.
I think that'd be.
Yeah,
helpful.
like Google Earth picture with.
Or field trip.
I mean, I
Well,
feel
we
like
did
it
have-
just
We
sets
did have
up.
a field trip.
Did you?
Yeah.
We did.
We had a field trip up there
I was.
because Carl came to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was afraid that we might
That was
say the
just
wrong
behind
thing.
the
Yeah.
affordable thing. That wasn't clear out at the far end, right? Didn't we just go
Huh?
behind the Glenwood
Well, we-
Gardens?
Yeah, we didn't walk the
We-
whole
we-
property.
But we walked up on the hillside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
where it was.
But
But
where
I
the
still
star
didn't
is
grasp
like way
the-
down the road behind Lowe's.
Yeah, I did.
So the limits of disturbance is literally the areas of land that they have to touch to build the buildings. And so it is much larger than what it's going to end up being where the buildings are. I think that's what you're getting to, Commissioner.
Yeah,
Gregg.
exactly. It's
The
like just
impact right
setting
now-
forth the.
Looks incredibly large.
Mhm.
What it will end up being is slightly different and it won't
And it's
always
so
look like it is
visible,
today.
it's So red.
Right.
So.
But they
visible.
have to disturb those areas
Until they
to
get.
make the project come out of the ground.
Right.
Those are two projects.
There are two projects very close to each other, yes.
So
John,
I think that would be
sorry.
good to highlight that in the future. Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for all the good discussion, even though we disagreed.
I think it's an exciting topic and relatively progressive. I think it's sort of on the hopefully cutting edge and not bleeding edge. That's all.
You can use that.
I'd like to thank staff for doing such a great job for guiding us through. It was great. I mean, really, truly, just reading into it and kind of putting in layman's terms so we could all understand it and, articulate that or, to the code was really great and super helpful. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I hope this is on the cutting edge and hopefully Carl can bring it and just bring it home.
Great.
Yeah, you tell
No
those people up
pressure.
state. They can come sit.
But
with
yeah,
us.
thank you guys for all the great discussion. It's always fun to hash it out and talk.
All that I'll say is good luck at council, you know, we didn't have a lot of public people here and that was, because, you know, just doing the survey, I know in the community, there's people that are, it's hard to understand and listen to the speak, I think, and, you know, from doing the survey, I think the survey was awesome and the amount of responses you got was great. But I think it's difficult, and I think Watkins pointed this out, and I think in your report that it's confusing for people. They don't understand planning speak and they don't understand zoning speak and all of that. So it's a tough thing. I think it's good. I think we did a good job and I think it was good tonight, but we're not on council, so.
Yeah.
But it's good. So thank you very much. I think you did a good job and good luck going forward.
Just thanks for the survey. I think that's great to get the input from the community. So I felt a lot more comfortable proceeding, having that input than not having it. Director's comment.
Thank you, guys. You truly did a heavy lift tonight, and so it's appreciated. We do have our regularly scheduled meeting at the end of October per usual. I believe that's 24th. We will have a full schedule again of approximately 5 items. Maybe 4. Sometimes it shakes out. We've got some location and extents for city projects. The continued item from last week on a variance for the garage, preliminary plat, and then also a sign variance in that mix. So I hope you all are able to come, and if not, let me know.
Good. I think our work is done here. We're adjourned.